Paranormal M follows the footsteps of fear. Haunted legends, cursed history, and chilling encounters await you. Subscribe now and walk with us. The Ghost Train. I'll do my best to piece this story together, though it happened more than 15 years ago. Some of the edges have blurred over time. When I was about 16 or 17, my parents took me on a trip to London. We had already spent a couple of busy days exploring the city, crammed with sightseeing, museum visits, and far too many stops at souvenir shops. One evening, after wandering through the streets until the sky had dimmed to a soft navy blue, we headed toward the underground to return to our hotel. It must have been around 9 p.m., not too late, but late enough that the crowds had mostly melted away at that time. We entered a quiet underground station to catch a train. Our hotel was near the Greenwich area, so we needed to change lines halfway through the journey. The first leg of the trip was uneventful. It was only when we reached the second station that the night took a strange turn. I can't remember the name of the station anymore, but it was farther out and less central and less crowded. The tiled walls echoed with the hollow sound of our footsteps. A train had just departed, and the screen above the platform said the next one would arrive in about 10 minutes. We wandered to our usual lucky spot, where we liked to guess where the doors would stop. We were the only ones there. We were chatting quietly. A few minutes later, a young man and a woman joined us at the far end of the platform. They were standing close together. Clearly tourists, too. Then, earlier than expected, we heard the familiar low vibration of a train approaching from the tunnel. My dad picked up his bag and got ready to board. My mom smiled pretty tiredly. We were all eager to get back. But as the train rolled in, something felt wrong. The display on the front that usually showed the destination was completely dark. I scanned the front window, expecting to catch a glimpse of the driver's silhouette, and there was nothing. The cabin was empty. The train, it slid along the platform, slowing to a stop in front of us. Every carriage that passed was utterly deserted, and not a single person sat inside of them. The doors hissed open with a soft click. No sound came from inside, not even the hum of the ventilation. And oddly, there was no rush of air that usually swept through the platform when the train arrived. It was like the train had glided in without displaying the world around it. My dad stepped forward instinctively. My mom's hand shot out from his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "We'll wait for the next one." And her voice wasn't loud, but the weight in it froze him in place. Caught the other couple's eyes, and they stood still, too uncertain, maybe spooked like us, and no one moved. The door stayed open longer than usual, as if waiting for somebody who would never come. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. Then, without a sound, they slid shut. The empty train pulled away into the darkness. Minutes later, the scheduled train arrived, and this one felt real. Wind rushed against my legs, and the display lit up at the destination. I saw the driver clearly through the front window. People were sitting inside, reading and talking, looking tired like ordinary passengers at the end of a long day. We got on, and my dad asked, half joking, half confused, "What was that all about?" Mom only shook her head and said, "That train wasn't right. If we'd gotten on it..." She didn't finish the sentence, and she didn't need to. I've often thought back to that night. I wish the story had something more obvious, like flickering lights or ghostly figures. Just some explanation that shouted supernatural, but it didn't. Even supernormal would be fine. Just an unscheduled train with no passengers, no driver, no destination, and no sound. And all I know is this: I've never been so certain in my life that we weren't meant to be on it. whispers through the hallway. When I was about 11, maybe turning 12, my family moved into this old brick house that had been around since the early 1900s. It wasn't a grand mansion or anything like that, but it had that creaky, echoing feeling that old houses usually carry. In the bathroom upstairs, hidden behind an oddly placed wooden shelf, there was a narrow door that led to a storage crawl space. Every time I passed by it, something inside me would tense up. I couldn't explain why, but it felt like the air in there was heavier somehow. I'd hold my breath a little and walk faster whenever I had to go in. About 2 or 3 months after we moved in, when everybody had already gotten used to the place, I started to hear faint tapping sounds from behind that crawlspace door at night. It might have been the pipes or a squirrel or something completely normal, but it didn't sound like that to me. It was too slow, too deliberate. Out of curiosity, I brought my dog into the bathroom one afternoon, as we all do. Normally, she loved exploring every corner of the house, but when I set her down facing the little door, she froze, growled low in her throat, and backed away with her fur standing on end. Strangely, a few nights after that, the tapping stopped entirely. Then one night not long after, I'm lying in bed with the door closed and the window shut tight. There was no draft, no breeze, nothing. Then, out of nowhere, a warm gust of air brushed across my cheek, like somebody had just sighed right in front of me. I sat up and called my sister's name, thinking she was messing around, but the room was empty. The next morning, I went down a rabbit hole online. I found all sorts of posts about spirit breaths, and how they were supposed to be a sign that something was there, and oddly enough, I wasn't terrified. Thought it was kind of fascinating. The next evening, I started hearing soft murmurs from the little attic storage room next to my bedroom. There's only 2 rooms on that floor, so I would have heard it if somebody came up the stairs. It wasn't anyone in my family. My mom laughed it off and said I was letting the house get into my head. But my dad took me seriously. He told me to keep him updated if anything else happened, and actually made me feel safer. Months passed, things went quiet, and then one Sunday afternoon, when we were all in the living room, my sister found this old folded piece of paper propped against the fireplace. It's one of those memorial cards, the kind they give out at funerals, and it reads, "In loving memory of Margaret, 1919 to 1987. We didn't know any Margaret, and none of us had put it there. So we tucked it away in a drawer. But the next week it shut up again on the mantel, and then a few days later it was gone. Then back. Went on like that for weeks. My prank-loving brother was away at university at the time, so it wasn't one of his jokes. We all agreed on that much. The last thing I think I remember happened late one evening. I think I was alone and I was making hot chocolate in the kitchen, and suddenly the sound of a piano began playing, loud but muffled, like somebody was pressing the keys through a wall. I stepped out into the hallway and there was silence. I went upstairs, nothing. But the moment I stepped back into the kitchen, there it was again. The neighbors were away, no car outside, no lights. I just stood there holding the mug, trying to make sense of it all. And that was the last strange thing that ever happened in that house, at least to me. Maybe it was all in my head, and the house was old and the nights were quiet. I was only 12. But sometimes, even now, I still remember the way the warm breath felt against my face. The sandals that never returned. I just spent a few days in a small cabin near Lake Placid, completely alone. I lived by myself, and pre-COVID I used to travel solo for work all the time, so spending a few days alone isn't anything unusual for me. I just needed a different set of walls, Given the whole pandemic thing, I packed up everything beforehand so I wouldn't need to make any trips into town. The plan was drink tea in the porch, maybe walk down to the lake, read a couple of books, and basically let my brain rest. So I get there. And after the caretaker had to come by to help unstick the front door, excuse me, I unload my bags and set myself up on the porch with a drink and a paperback. When the light starts to fade, I figured I should bring my stuff upstairs and turn on some lights. It is an old cabin, creaky in that too quiet kind of a way. I feel a little unsettled, but I chalk it up to my imagination. I hop in the shower, and the second the water hits me, it's like this wave of dread hits. Sharp and gut level and primal. I rinse off as fast as I can, step out, without even meaning to, avoiding looking down the hall toward one particular room. It's like that air you breathe when a storm is about to break. I scold myself, make dinner downstairs, and just don't look that way again. The night is uneventful but restless. I wake up early, make coffee, and feeling ridiculous, close all the upstairs doors except for the bedroom I'm sleeping in. I spend most of the day outside reading and convincing myself that I've watched too many horror movies. During the day, little things happen, nothing wild, like a jar slides off the counter or a hand towel keeps slipping from the hook and my book falls off the chair twice. Gravity, wind, uneven floors. I try to laugh it off. When I shower that night, the dread comes again. Not as sharp, but heavy, like someone standing right behind me. I turn up the water, focus on breathing, and get through it. I sleep okay with the light on. By day 3, I've convinced myself that it's just me getting used to the place. I push cocktail hour to mid-afternoon, throw on a face mask, and do my version of vacation self-care. Nothing weird in the shower this time, which almost makes me proud of myself. Yeah. Later, I realize I've left my sandals upstairs, and I figure I'll grab them later. But when I go up to pack my bag that night, the same cold, creeping feeling slides back in, just like that first night. I move fast, I forget the sandals, I tell myself I'll just get them in the morning. And when the sun comes up, it's gorgeous out. Soft light on the water, birds everywhere, but my first thought as soon as my eyes open is, get out. No sound, no reason, just that word over and over. I decide I might as well pack up early anyway. Except the sandals. I tear through the cabin like a lunatic. I check closets I never opened under furniture behind the porch steps. Even the trunk of my car. They're gone. I tell myself I must have packed them in the wrong bag and slip on my slippers and leave. But when I get home, they're nowhere. I message the owner, I tell her not to bother shipping them back if they turn up. She says that she and the cleaning crew checked everywhere and there's nothing. That night the dreams start. Doors in my house slamming open and shut while something whispers right behind the wall. A shape with too many legs crawling down the hallway. A mouth that doesn't close, and I've had bad dreams before, but never like this. Never this sharp and never this close. Shadows in the frost. We moved around a lot when I was little. One of the houses that we ended up in was so old and run down that the windows rattled in the wind. The walls in my room frosted over every winter night. I used to trail a finger through the thin layer of ice, tracing little shapes, as if the room itself were alive. Maybe that's where my love for freezing cold bedrooms came from. When we first arrived, my grandmother stayed for a few nights to help us get settled in. She slept on the couch in the living room. I was on a cot next to her. One night she woke up feeling her blanket slipping off bit by bit, and when she opened her eyes she saw me. a 6-year-old standing at the foot of the couch, grinning ear to ear as I kept tugging at the blanket like it was a game. And here's the strange part. I've never been a sleepwalker. I talk in my sleep sometimes and maybe shout, but I've never walked around in it. Not before, not after. A few weeks later, after Grandma went home and I had the room, I woke up queasy in the middle of the night. The bathroom was past the living room, so I shuffled out in the dark. That's when I saw someone or something sitting in the old rocking chair by the corner. The moonlight from the window made the figure's curls shine, and for a heartbeat, I thought it was Grandma, but she wasn't there anymore. "Mom?" I whispered. The figure didn't move, it just sat there silent. And I swear I felt it looking right at me even though I couldn't see a face. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stumbled to the bathroom and locked the door, pressing my ear to it for what felt like forever. When I finally worked up the courage to peek back out, the chair was empty. My mom insisted that she hadn't been out there. She said I'd had a bad dream and I wanted to believe her. A year or so later, my older cousin came to stay with us. We played hide and seek like we always did. He was the best at hiding, almost too good. And after searching every upstairs room, I decided to try the basement. It was unfinished and dim, and the floor was painted this awful deep red that made it look like somebody had spilled buckets of blood. I used to have nightmares about it, actually. At the far end of the basement was this little back room lined with tall storage cabinets. I hated them. Too many spiders. But I was determined to find my cousin, so I pulled one of the creaky doors open. My breath caught in my throat, and perched on the top shelf was a figure curled into an impossible shape. For a second, I thought it was him, except the clothes were all wrong, and I couldn't see the chest rise and fall. It looked headless. I screamed and bolted up the stairs, only to slam right into my cousin, who was coming out of hiding after hearing me yell. We both went down to check. The shelves were empty. Nothing was there. But he saw my face and believed me. I never opened those cabinets again. I've had strange things happen in other places since then, but that house is the first I remember. Maybe it wasn't where it all began, or maybe it was. The Laughter in the Pines. It happened 15 years ago, and somehow it still lingers in the back of my mind. And sorry in advance if this is a little bit long and kind of clumsy. The year was 2007 in Conway, South Carolina. I was a sophomore in college, and that autumn a few of us, all dorm mates, decided to go, well, I guess you could call it ghost hunting. It was for fun. We started off with the usual spots. Small cemetery near campus, but never saw anything, so I hit the internet. Back then, it wasn't like now. We didn't have smartphones, but Google and MapQuest were good enough to get us into trouble. I found an old post on a ghost forum talking about something called the Lucas Bay Lights. Supposedly, strange lights and sound appeared deep in the woods of an abandoned plantation. It wasn't far from campus, and since we were bored college kids, that was the excuses that we need. We printed directions from MapQuest and set the GPS in my roommate's old Honda Civic. Legendary vehicle, by the way. Especially the 2004 to 2006 model, but moving on. The paved road soon gave way to back roads, then rougher dirt roads. After what felt like forever, we ended up on a straight stretch of dirt road, maybe a mile and a half long. No lights, no houses, no traffic, and the forum said the actual site could have been reached by car, or rather couldn't be because of a locked barrier. Sure enough, we found a rusted gate across the road. No signs, no warnings, just silence. So we parked on the empty road. We made the trip 3 or 4 times that semester and never saw another car out there. We always brought at least 2 vehicles because the self-service was awful, and a dead battery out there would have been a nightmare. And each time we came, we walked a little farther down the road beyond the gate. path itself felt forgotten. Packed dirt was covered in weeds and small rocks. On both sides, the ground sloped down sharply into a ditch and thick swamped woods. No sign of fresh tire tracks, no sign of anything except insects and occasional rustling in the trees. I remember thinking that my biggest fear would be stumbling on a gator or a snake, and about a mile in, some power lines crossed overhead and there was a narrow trail beneath them. That became our sort of unofficial turnaround point. Nothing ever happened those first few nights except the eerie quiet. We snapped photos with old digital cameras and flip phones. A few friends swore they saw orbs in the pictures, and I figured it was just dust and bad flash. But on the last trip, we went farther than we ever had, maybe another quarter-mile past the power lines, and the night air was heavy. The kind of stillness that makes you whisper without realizing it, and then it happened. A laugh, sharp and cracked and stretched out, cut through the silence. A maniacal, almost gleeful laugh, and it came from our left. But it didn't sound like it came from the woods exactly. It felt closer, like it was right behind us, or worse, inside of our heads. We all froze. Then the laugh came again, and it was longer this time. It was almost like somebody was mocking us. We swung our flashlights into the trees, but the beams caught nothing but tangled branches. No footsteps, no shadows, just that awful laugh echoing in the dark. Someone screamed, and then everybody started running. I don't remember deciding to run, but my legs just moved. We didn't stop until we reached the cars. I still remember the sound of the gravel under our shoes and somebody crying behind me. No one talked on the drive back. No one even played music. It was just silence. And what scared me most wasn't just the sound itself, but the way everybody avoided the topic afterwards. Even the loudest guys in our group, the ones who joked about everything, didn't want to talk about it again. Visitation Dream. This story happened this past December, 2024. But to preface the story, my husband's grandparents had a very weird relationship. They'd been together since they were 18 and were married for 50 years. They were not very lovey-dovey. My husband's grandmother had been bedridden for about 2.5 years. They were in kidney failure. We had just found out recently that she was not a candidate for dialysis. She wasn't able to do anything for herself, and my husband's grandfather had been her caregiver during this time. We set her hospital bed up in the kitchen, and she was happy to just be home. Me and my husband had been staying with his grandparents and aunt and uncle. They all lived together on their couch for about 2 weeks, after moving from the other side of the duplex after a disagreement with his great aunt who lived on the other side. And his grandfather was in the process of clearing out the spare room upstairs for us. And one day he finally did, so we got all of our stuff in there, and he had made a nice pork roast dinner. He was in a great mood that night. We all had a glass of eggnog together and went to bed. The next morning, we all wake up, and my husband goes to work, and around 12:30 that afternoon I got a call from my mother-in-law. They were saying that she had found my husband's grandfather dead in the driveway. He had had a massive heart attack while going to take her dog on a walk. Damn. The only reason that my mother-in-law had found him was because the doors to her car were locked, which she never locks. She ended up locking her keys in the car, and he had given her a spare key, but she didn't know where he was. So we left work, and my husband and most of his family went to the hospital to go deal with all of that. I was at the house with his grandmother. When everybody arrived home, we told her that he was gone and cried together, and then some of us went outside just to get some air. A tree fell in the backyard. His grandmother shared a glass of champagne with us the night in memory of his grandfather. That night was the second night that we kind of swept in the spare room, which I will assume is slept. My husband woke up the next morning. He looks at me. He said that he'd be right back, so he went to his grandfather's room. was looking for something. He comes back empty-handed, tells me that in the middle of the night he had a dream and his grandfather had come into our room while we were in there sleeping, then woke him up and said, "Did you give Mima her Christmas present yet?" My husband was like, "No, we don't know where it is." And my husband's grandfather in the dream said, "Well, the hell are you waiting for? I'll show you where it is." So he goes in there and he sees the present, and it's in a blue box. It's a silver necklace with the words on the box, but fast forward to the next morning, my husband couldn't find it. He was like, "Oh, okay, maybe it was just a dream." So later that day, my mother-in-law and myself, my husband and his aunt that were all living in the same house, we're all sitting in the living room. My husband mentioned the dream he had, and his aunt says, "Wait a second," and goes upstairs. She comes downstairs with the blue box that my husband had seen in his dream and says, "Is this it?" Once we actually saw the words it said, we were in shock. It basically says something along the lines of, "To my wife, I didn't marry you because I could live with you. It's because I can't live without you." Which had a character for him. He's never the type of person to be romantic like that. He was a sailor and spent a lot of time in a sailboat, and he was a major star. His aunt said that she was cleaning up his grandfather's room looking for his phone and found it and brought it into her room so it didn't get lost. So the next day his grandmother ends up in the hospital with a severe infection. Wasn't doing great. We brought it to the hospital to give it to his grandmother, and when my husband was giving it to her and telling her about the dream, it felt like grandfather was in the room. I could visualize his grandfather standing behind my husband with his hand on his shoulder. After that, we went home, and his aunt called us and said that his grandmother had said that she wanted to go into hospice and be with her husband. So for the next week and a half, we visited her, and she never spoke again. She slipped into an almost comatose-like state. She ended up passing away on Christmas Day, right after her youngest grandchild, 11, opened the present that she had gotten him. The next day, my husband tells me that he had another dream. And in this dream, we were in the living room and his grandfather was there. But he looked younger, more put together, and he ran up and hugged his grandfather and told him that he missed him. After about a minute of him hugging him, he said that, "That's enough. I got things to do." So after that, his grandmother comes walking down the stairs in fancy clothes. They said bye to everyone and left. We lost his grandfather on December 11th, 2024. His grandmother, December 25th, 2024. Exactly 2 weeks to the date. Star falling into my room. Please help me understand. When I was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, I had this thing happen to me that I think about all the time now. I completely forgot it for years, like really forgot. Till recently, it just came out of me while I was talking. Now I can't stop talking about it. It was real, and I know it happened. I was in bed with a tooth underneath my pillow, waiting for the tooth fairy. I always sleep in my stomach, but this time I'd flipped onto my back because I was waiting for my dad to come and tuck me in. I remember being really excited. I was not sleepy. I was wide awake watching the sliver of sky I could see from my window. Just a little strip between the storm blinds and the neighbor's house. Not a big view, just enough to see a single star. I was staring at that star, and then it started to fall. It began small, like it was way up in the sky, but it got bigger as it came closer, like a glowing orb. Not perfectly round, more like a pulsing, glowing, spiky or round shape that stretched larger as it got closer. And as it got bigger and came toward me, I heard this buzzing sound. Not loud, but definitely there, like a hum. Like something electrical but soft and, well, very soft. The sound's not the important thing here. The sound was like almost to cover the sound of anything else in my reality as the light was getting closer. I was completely frozen. I couldn't move, not even blink. But I wasn't scared, I was just stuck, watching this happen. The star got bigger and bigger until it was huge, and it came through my window. It didn't break anything, it just entered, like it phased into the room. The light completely took over my vision, and I couldn't see my bed, the walls, or anything. Just pure white light, total whiteout. It's like it entered me. Then suddenly I gasped and I sat up like my whole body jolted upright. And time had passed because the dollar was under my pillow and the tooth was gone. My dad wasn't in the bathroom anymore like he had been when I first lay down. I'd seen the light under the door and heard him washing his hands, but now it was quiet and it was done and I'd missed it. But to me, it felt like no time had passed at all, like the whole thing was maybe an instant. I grabbed the dollar and I ran to wake up my dad, telling him I saw the tooth fairy, because that's what I thought it was at the time. That was how my little kid brain tried to make sense of it, but he said, okay, and brushed it off. But I know I wasn't asleep. I was awake and excited and watching, and this wasn't a dream, it really happened. The only other time I've seen something shaped like that, this featureless glowing being or presence, was when I was 16. I had this dream where I floated into a different place. It was like sky above the sky below. I was just drifting inside of it, very surreal and dualistic. There was this massive wall of light, and from inside it something started walking toward me. It didn't have a face or arms or features, but I knew it was a being. And it just pushed me back and said, not yet. And that was all. Then I was suddenly back in my body again. The shape of that thing, the way it moved forward and how I just couldn't resist it. That's exactly what this light star thing felt like as I entered my room. Not threatening, just undeniable, like it was coming no matter what. I don't know what it was. I don't know why it happened to me. Didn't even remember it happened until very recently. I guess I tucked it away. Told maybe 1 or 2 people, but it came back online about a year ago, and I'm so curious to understand what it meant for me as I'm learning to understand myself. So I just want to know, has anybody ever had something like this happen to them? A star falling from the sky, getting bigger and entering your room, filling it with light and then just being gone. No vision, no message, just that. Not astral projection, not sleep paralysis. I'm talking about a star falling into your room at night. Only the sticky green ones on the ceiling, for me. My ghost story. I still get chills thinking about what happened during my senior year of high school. It all started with this rumor about our school theater being haunted. I know. Haunted theater, tale as old as time. But I swear, this is at least my experience. When I was going through the theater program, older students used to talk about a ghost circle. A circle drawn in chalk on the backstage wall. They said it was there to bind a ghost, and everyone was warned never to break it. No one ever explained exactly what would happen if you did, but even the skeptics wouldn't mess with it. The summer before my senior year, the school started remodeling the theater. They repainted the entire place, including the wall with the ghost circle. Painted right over it, as if it never existed. And that's when the strange things began. Almost immediately, weird stuff started happening. The janitor, usually very professional, suddenly refused to clean the theater at night, wouldn't go near the prop closet anymore. She seemed genuinely spooked, and the prop closet would make banging noises like pipes clanging. But the moment somebody opened the door, the noises stopped. Props would disappear or turn up in odd places, and there was often a shadowy figure on stage, which we tried to blame on the lighting. Never felt right. I got really curious after everything creepy started and did some research about the ghost story. Found out that a former student, deeply involved in a theater program, had died in a car accident years earlier, right before a show. Out of respect, I won't share more details about him, but knowing this added a whole new layer to the weirdness. The culmination of weirdness was during the senior show I was directing that December. Tech kept glitching and lights malfunctioned and sound cues failed. Things that worked perfectly for weeks in rehearsal started suddenly breaking. On closing night, the house lights refused to work, so I gathered up the cast and crew and we respectfully asked the ghost to stop interfering. The moment we did, the lights flicked on instantly and I said, "Thank you," out loud, thinking it was polite. But looking back, that's probably when the ghost attached to me. After the show, my stage manager gave me a bouquet of flowers. I took them home, put them in a vase or a vase, whichever wording you guys fancy. I'm going with vase today. They put them in a vase on the kitchen table. I spent the rest of my night sat at the table talking with my aunt who was visiting. And after literal hours of chatting, 3 of the flowers suddenly slumped over at the same time. They didn't just bend, they looked like their stems had been cleanly cut, revealing the inside of the stems. I couldn't explain why or how it happened after they'd stood perfectly all evening. I didn't tell my aunt about the ghost then, even though it felt exactly like something we'd expect from the theater spirit. Weird things started happening at home. I slept in the finished basement, where my bed was in the corner, and the doorways only had curtains instead of doors. Sometimes I'd wake up to see the curtains swaying and thought it was just drafts. Then one night I felt my bed dip behind me as if somebody sat down, but when I turned around, no one was there. Later, my aunt stayed over again in another part of the basement, and one morning told me she thought the dog had jumped in bed with her. She felt something run up her body, but when she opened her eyes, the dog was, no dog was there. The dog had been locked upstairs all night. That's when I finally told her everything about the ghost. She suggested calmly communicating with him and asking him to leave me alone while I was sleeping. We kept it between us and didn't tell the rest of my family yet. Months later, one of my sisters had a friend sleep over. She and my sister shared a bed while my other sister slept on the ground next to them. The next morning, the friend said that the sister, who was supposed to be sleeping on the floor next to the bed, held her hand all night. She gushed about how sweet it was. But the sister denied this, saying she went back to her own bed early, didn't hold anyone's hand. The friend was so freaked out she never stayed over again. And eventually, I told my family about the ghost following me home, and they shared their own experiences. One sister heard a loud bang one night and found a bag had fallen off a shelf for no reason. Another kept hearing noises from her closet that stopped whenever she opened it. But luckily, nothing was ever out of place. That was just the beginning. There were more strange incidents over the next couple of years, like noises and movements. Little things that still make me shiver. But then, almost as suddenly as it began, it all stopped, and it's been years now. I have no idea why the ghost left or what made him move on, and my family and I almost joke about him now. Like he was just some weird, invisible member of the household. Since then, nothing unusual has happened, and life's gone back to normal. There were a few other incidents that came to mind for me writing this post, but I'll have to ask my family to remember the majority of them. It's not the scariest by any means, but I swear to everybody I know, we had a ghost for at least a few years. Strange activity in my home. Hi. I think my house has at least one ghost. It's very hard to tell though, because we are a family of ADHDers and have a bunch of pets. I'm writing this on my phone, so please forgive the formatting. For some background, I grew up in this house. My parents bought it from a family who bought it new in 1976. Only lived here for about 4 years. My parents rented it out to one family for about 4 years in the 90s before I bought it from them and moved my new little family back in. The neighborhood is built on an old limestone quarry. I've lived here for most of my life, except for a few years in my teens. As a child, I always felt watched, and I'd sit in my window at night and felt something in the backyard in the dark just watching. It wasn't scary, just present. There's also a central part of the house, between the hall and the garage and laundry room, that feels spooky. My sister corroborated the spooky feeling one time when she was visiting and told me about a time when she was doing laundry. She was overcome with the feeling of get out. In my previous marriage, we had a lot of my then-husband's family living here. At one time, there were 7 children under the age of 12. All of them were afraid of this area. Multiple adults have pointed out that it feels eerie there as well. Over the last couple of years, I've noticed more activity in the house. The notable things are, 1, phantom cat jumping onto the bed. I was working overnights at the time and would spend my off nights in a sleeping house. One night, I'm laying in bed with my now husband who was sleeping. I was browsing the internet when I felt a cat jump on the bed and walk between my husband and me, then laid down. We put the pets up at night and keep them out of the room while we sleep. I thought maybe we missed putting one of them, so I shone my flashlight over to where I thought it was. Nothing was there. I felt around and still nothing. I hopped up and did a head count of pets, and everyone was accounted for. 2. Loud crashing of shelves to the ground with nothing out of place. For a couple of months, randomly, a loud crashing noise was coming from the office. And we have a bunch of shelves on the walls, and those shelves are full of crap. Collectibles and Legos and pictures and trinkets, so you get the point. So hearing one of those shelves come crashing down and stuff breaking and flying across our tile floor was alarming. But when we'd go to check on it, nothing would be out of place, and this happened at least 5 times. I was not the only one to hear it, and I wasn't the only one to go check. I have a video from my security camera of the noise, and the camera was pointed at the puppy crate. 3. A hanging plant was torn from its place. I had some small succulents hanging in my window in the kitchen. One was a little guy in a swing hanging from twine. The twine was fairly substantial. It was in good condition that day when I checked the moisture level of the soil. I wish I had taken a picture of the twine after this happened, but I wasn't thinking of documenting anything yet. But as I was saying, in the early hours of the morning, the twine was pulled apart at all 3 supporting points, and my plant went tumbling. The most striking thing about this is that my dogs didn't bark, and if I set something down too hard in my nightstand in the night, my dogs will go off. But nothing here. It's like they were watching and the noise was expected. I have a recording of the noise, and the silence that follows, and I checked the video to see if there was a cat to blame, but none of them seemed to be over there when it happened. 4. Sunglasses go missing, and they're later found in a reusable baggie in the sink. And this is a weird one that I can't figure out. I was alone at home and getting ready to leave for an appointment. I have to have my sunglasses to dry because daylight hurts my eyes, and as I was leaving, I opened my purse and checked for and saw my glasses and put my phone in my purse. Then I decided I should use the bathroom before I left. I set my purse down and went to the bathroom. Then I grabbed my purse and went to the door while digging for my glasses. Not in there. Stumped, I retraced my steps, and I couldn't find them. I searched for a few minutes but had to go, and when I got home again, I searched again and found nothing. And like I said, I have ADHD, so I'll often lose something I'm holding, but can usually find it. I keep looking and getting rather frustrated. I eventually pull my husband in to help look. Nothing. I give up for the evening and I go do the dishes, and in the sink inside of a reusable sandwich bag are my glasses. And this weirds me out enough to review my security camera footage because did I put them in there? No, I saw on the tape where I put the bag in the sink the night before. I saw me searching for the glasses, and then when my husband and I were talking about where they could be, I saw the bag open by itself. Like the ghost was trying to help or something. Well, I don't know. Seems so strange. These are the most recent and, well, most my attention-grabbing of incidents. There's always something weird happening, but 99% of the time I can attribute it immediately to my ADHD or a pad. I saw things as a child, and they're happening again. I grew up in rural Ireland, in a Jehovah's home. I was a young boy, around the age of 7 and 8, when I first started seeing things that supposedly weren't there. And most of my friends and family thought I was possessed and would lock me in my room for weeks when I started to act up. The first event is very blurry in my mind, so don't take this as completely accurate. First spooky event. It was around midday. My mother was in the kitchen. My father went to Dublin with a few of JW friends, which I'm assuming is Jehovah's Witnesses friends, to preach there. I was outside playing with my brother, probably soccer or tag, and he asked me to get a bottle of water for Mom, so I go in and my mother's lying on the ground with a puddle of blood around her. I screamed, kneeled down to her side, and hugged her. Her body. Trying to figure what they wrote here. I could feel the heat from her body, the way the blood stuck to my skin, and my brother comes in panicked from the yelling. Asked what's wrong. I said something along the lines of, "Call Dad before my mother walks into the room confused on why I'm on my knees crying. She's asked why I'm crying." I looked her and looked back, and the body's gone, and so is the blood. Second most fearful happening. I was about 11 or 12 then, and I had consistent hallucinations of one specific creature that called himself Bob. He was about 2.5 meters tall, had pale white skin with long arms that stopped at his knees. His head a light string of gray hair, but other than that he was bald. He always hand-ripped white hospital gown-looking thing. Bob mostly came in sleep paralysis, where he'd cry while facing the corner. After a few months of this consistent appearance, I was watching TV. I got a sudden feeling of dread and fear. I looked behind me, and he was standing watching. This was the first time I'd ever seen his face, and he didn't have cheeks, and his mouth filled with huge teeth with small, fully black eyes. I jumped and quickly looked back, nor waiting to freak out. My different, in parentheses, brother, and he reached and grabbed my shoulder, and I stayed silent the rest of the day. And that night I slept under my bed, which is where I would sleep when I got scared at night, and haven't seen Bob till today. Current day, about 12 years after the last time I saw Bob, and he has been watching me again. And he hasn't done anything besides stare and cry yet. But I don't know what to do to really help stop these hallucinations. I don't want to see him anymore. My haunted house. We bought this house 1 year ago today, July 8th. We were told when we came to see the house, the previous owner had died. But it wasn't until we were a week or two away from closing that I found the obituary and read that she had died at her home. Immediately when we moved in, I started seeing things. My 18-year-old daughter said it was haunted from the moment she stepped in. She was not with us when we looked at it, and this was after we had bought it. It started with me seeing what I would say is a woman walking from the dining room to the living room as I went from the living room to the kitchen. It makes a big circle. The house is a tri-level, so the main floor, then stairs that go up to the bathroom and bedrooms. Separate stairs that go downstairs to the walkout basement. And that opens into a utility room and a second bathroom. Also, for moving in, every time I'd go down the stairs from the bedroom, I'd see somebody standing at the other stairs. It's hard to describe this, but there is a window with no glass. It lets you see to the other stairs that go down. A friend has experienced this too, and I haven't happened in months, and nothing has changed. I kept all this to myself, but my husband, who's been a non-believer until recent years, and experiences that sort of changed that, started seeing things. He had a black shadow walk up to him in the bathroom. He thought somebody had came in until he saw it disappear. It freaked him out. And he has seen shadows other times too. I've seen shadows walk by and move doors. The weirdest thing would be seeing what looked like a person reflected in the TV when it was black. It was like somebody bent over looking at the TV very closely, and then they stood straight up and stepped back. And I've seen my husband a few times, and it wasn't him. He woke up, got out of the bed, and he was asleep next to me. So I was trying not to wake him. Started downstairs and realized he was asleep on the couch. Went and checked, and the bed was empty. The newest thing was last night. I had just turned my phone off, and I was just settling to go to sleep. And I wear a sleep mask, so it was on. I felt an arm on my hip and slide across. Took my mask off, rolled over and checked my husband, who was asleep with both arms under his blanket. We had separate ones. I hadn't felt him move, and this is the first time it's touched me. Very weird. Before somebody asks, yes, I have cats, but my door stays shut. They're not allowed in my room. Sorry this is long. It's not even everything that's happened, but a big chunk of it. I should tell some of my other ghost stories sometime. My Belize haunting. I never had a story to contribute, but that changed in May of 2019. My husband and I love to travel. So when I graduated from my ultrasound program in March, we decided to celebrate by taking a trip. 3 of my close friends had also graduated at the same time, so they joined us in our travel plans. We decided to spend a week in Belize, and we were so excited. We wanted to see as much of Belize as we could, so we stayed in 3 different areas. The place we stayed was in a town called Placencia. We got a room with these beautiful sort of cabanas right on the beach. We stayed there for a total of 3 nights. The first night was uneventful. The second night, unfortunately, didn't go as smoothly. After a super fun day of beach activities, we decided to head back to the room to get some much-needed rest. However, when we got back to the room, it seemed that the atmosphere had changed a bit, and I felt immediately uncomfortable, but pushed that out of my mind since I was so exhausted. My husband and I were sleeping in the living room, adjacent to the kitchen. Down the hall from the kitchen was a room to the right where 2 of my friends, Ashley and Brianna, they were sleeping, and a room to the left where my friend Selena was sleeping. At the end of the hall was the bathroom. I woke up the second night around 2:30 a.m. to a very loud noise in the kitchen. It sounded as if somebody was banging pots and pans around and clanging the silverware. My husband was sleeping soundly next to me, so I thought it was one of my friends making a midnight snack. was angry that they were being so loud. There's a little divider between my side of the bed and the kitchen, so I had to lean over to see who was making the noise. I was about to say something to them, but I didn't see anybody there and the noises stopped. I then heard footsteps walking around the hallway and the kitchen very loudly. This went on for an hour, and then it stopped and I was able to fall back asleep. I woke up the next morning, a little bit nervous and a little bit annoyed, wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I asked my friend Ashley if it was her. She freaked out and said she was about to ask me the same thing. She said that she woke up at 2:30 a.m. and heard the exact same things, and she even thought she heard the footsteps pacing around her bed for a while. Brianna had somehow managed to sleep through it, so she crawled into bed next to her and fell back asleep. She told me that she has a dream where she saw a man standing before her, wet and dripping, and she knew that he had drowned. At this point, we were hoping that Selena would say it was her, so we went to ask her about it. Unfortunately, she had woken up at the same time and heard the noises, and the steps went into her room and around her bed. She also said that at one point, they seemed to stop at the side of her bed. She felt as if somebody was watching her. We were all freaking out, but decided to finish our stay at the hotel, as we only had one night left. The next night, I was a little uneasy going to bed, but managed to fall asleep anyways. I was woken up around 3 to a loud crash in the kitchen. It sounded like the fridge had fallen over, but when I looked, nothing was out of place, and I was terrified and kept trying to wake my husband. He's a very heavy sleeper, didn't even move, and I was on the verge of tears, but somehow managed to fall back asleep, and as soon as I did, I dreamed that this man was trying to get into our cabana. We had to hold the door shut. Peeked through the window and saw his face, and it was extremely detailed and realistic. He was a white, bald man with a blonde mustache and looked angry. Eventually, he shoved his way through the door and then shoved my chest. And as soon as he, touched me in my dream, I woke up. I felt the sensation of hands in the place that he shoved. Quickly went away. I was awake for another half hour, too terrified to move, but luckily, the sun started coming up and I felt safer. Everyone woke up and didn't have anything to report, so we packed up and hightailed it out of that cabana to the airport. Happy to be going home. We couldn't research anything because the Wi-Fi was awful, so we had to wait until we got home from our trip. As soon as we landed and we started doing research, I came across this article about a man who'd been drinking at the bar next to our resort, went out for a swim and ended up drowning, just like the guy in Ashley's dream. They pulled his body up onto the beach in front of our resort. The article featured a picture of the man who had drowned. He was a white male with a blonde mustache, like the guy from my dream. We all freaked out, but we knew it was him who was banging around our hotel at night. I emailed the manager, but she defied everything. Maybe defied. Never encountered anything like that, and I can definitely say I'm a firm believer. And it was a lovely trip, but we will not be going back to Belize. The Little Boy in My Old House. When I left the military and secured a new job, I had to move from Norfolk, Virginia, much closer to Washington, D.C. I lived there alone for a year until my wife had finished her military service and was able to move her and the kids out to where I was living. When the time came, we settled on renting a small 3-bedroom townhouse. We weren't expecting to be there long, as my goal was to leave Virginia and get a job somewhere else. And as always with life, nothing stays as planned. We ended up living in that house for 7 years until we settled on just buying a home. Those 7 years were filled with some strange occurrences in this house. It all started with a discussion my oldest son would have with his mother about his room at night. He had the second largest bedroom, and at the time he was 4 and our daughter was 3. Our son would go on to tell us how a little boy would come to him in his room at night and talk to him. He said he would talk about how he had to hide from the bad man because he would kill him if he found him. We were confused, but figured maybe he was just having some weird dreams. And this went on for a couple of years, though until he started to get closer to 12 when he ended up having to move rooms. We decided because our youngest daughter is getting older, she needed a bigger room. So the wife and I moved our room into the basement, moved her son into an old room, and moved our daughter to his old room. Then it started again, except with her daughter. She started to tell us how she would see this boy, and unlike my son, it was scaring her. She would often sleep on the couch in the living room, and this is where her odd habit of needing to sleep with lights and TV on started as well. And this isn't where it ended, though. There was an occasion where I was taking a nap on the couch in the living room, and the wife, laying opposite of me on the couch, was just sitting and reading a book. That's when she saw something. She looks up with her skin pale, asks if I saw what she saw. I didn't, and I asked what did she see. She said she had seen what looked like a very short person walk by the couch right behind where I was laying. Whatever or whoever it was, they were gone. When I turned around at least, and, well, she even saw this thing disappear right in front of her. Needless to say, this terrified her a little, and my wife has always been a bit more sensitive to paranormal things, so she always did see more than I ever did. On another day, while I was at work, the kids were at school. She told me she was laying on the couch, could see right up the stairs to the first landing, and a little boy in very old clothing was actually sitting on the stairs. She explained that she had asked the boy what his name was, and how old he was, and even invited him to sit on the couch with her, and if he was lonely. She said there was not a single answer, and the boy just stayed where he was. Now, I never witnessed or really saw anything happen, but I have had my own experiences as well with this boy. Back before the rooms were moved around, there were many times when the wife and kids would go see her mother, and I'd be home alone for weeks at a time. No matter what I did, you always felt like somebody was sitting with you or watching you. I had a problem with having to sleep in the dark in the home when everyone was gone. I used to sleep in her bedroom and it was upstairs, but I couldn't anymore, as every time I did, there just always seemed to be somebody in the room with me or standing in the hallway. Now, shortly before we ended up moving, there was a series of the same incident that got me to the point where I could never even sleep in the upstairs room anymore, ever. My wife and I don't sleep in the same rooms. It's due to our habits. She needs lights and a TV on, and I need darkness and silence. So we just sleep in other rooms. Well, I opted to just stay on the couch every night. But for a few nights, I had to sleep in my son's room because we had to get rid of our couch, wait for a new one to arrive. My son had a trundle bed, so I slept on it for a few nights. And every night I slept on this thing, I'd be falling asleep, and then I would just feel like someone or something would lay down right next to me. I wouldn't see an indentation, but as soon as I would look, there'd be no one there. At first, I thought, well, maybe it's one of the cats we owned, but they were never in the room with us up there. To be honest, there was really never anyone up there in general. This would happen every night, and when I brought it up one day, my son, who is now 11, told me, "Yeah, it happens all the time. I used to be afraid, but now I'm used to it." I did research on the house. However, there was no listed history of a boy living there, or ever dying on the property. The only history of the area was that it used to be mostly trees where we lived many years ago. And the area was also where a Civil War battle happened before everything else. Still no mention of the deaths of young children anywhere. To this day, in an odd way, I feel horrible about moving out of that house, because being a parent has made me feel as if we left a child there to be lonely. And perhaps that's all it was. This child's spirit was just happy there were people there. Now he didn't have to feel lonely anymore. Who was this little boy? Star Hill Hauntings. In a small town in upstate New York, about 15 minutes north of Utica, there's a place called Remsen. It's home to quite the hot spot for unexplained activity. Star Hill, as it's known locally. It's a point on Star Hill Road in Remsen, New York, where the Penn Mountain State Forest meets the road. On the road are 2 parking areas, both with impressive views of the Mohawk Valley. You will find 2 lookouts, one along the actual road and another off of a trail that turns off the road and goes into the forest. Locally, we refer to them as the first and second lookouts. The first being the one by the road, the second being the one in the forest. So I'll be referring to them as such. Up this trail is also a cemetery, a small cluster of buildings, if you can call them that. A small body of water known as Hatch's Pond, and a radar dome with a sign from the U.S. Air Force prohibiting anybody from getting too close to it. I've gone there. All of these locations have their share of strange activity. Over the years, people have mostly used this as a gathering spot. It isn't uncommon to go there on a nice weekend in the summer and find people camping or some high school kids having a party. That is, or at least was, mostly what it was known for. High school type parties. I've spent my fair share of time here over the years. I've only experienced one of these myself. It's just the kind of place everybody seems to have a story about. Stories vary from hearing screams in the middle of the night to floating orbs of light crossing the road and disappearing into the woods. I'll outline all of these phenomena and provide some possible explanations. The orbs. Undoubtedly, the most popular story is that of the mysterious floating orbs that can be seen alongside the road by the first lookout. Everyone's story seems to be the same. 2 to 3 orbs of light floating about 6 feet above the road. They appear seemingly out of nowhere, and they appear to almost dance around and slowly move across the road and then disappear into the trees. I've personally seen them while I was parked at the first lookout facing down the road. I saw 2 of these orbs float slowly across the road and then seemingly disappear into the tree line, just like the stories had said. So what could be causing this? The legends say that there are lanterns of Daniel Roberts. Or these are the lanterns of Daniel Roberts, a 19th century doctor who lived in the area and practiced holistic medicines and herbal remedies. Locals called him the witch doctor. Claimed he also showed interest into the cult. In 1820, he traveled on the road and was thrown from his horse. The fall broke his leg and he died at the age of 45 from his injuries. He often traveled at night with a lantern and hung one from a window in his house, and people say that his spirit is carrying these orbs as if they're lanterns, while he still travels that same path he did so many years ago. Another popular story is that the lanterns are carried by the Baron von Baron von Steuben, a Revolutionary War general who once lived in that area. Sometime after his death in the early 1900s, they moved his body from its original resting place to a memorial that had been constructed in his honor. His wishes were strictly against this, as he wanted a burial that a normal man would receive. Legend states that these lanterns are carried by the Baron, searching for his body. One thing is certain, these lights cannot be coming from a vehicle. They're too far apart to be headlights and have a distinct flicker to them like candlelight. It's also been speculated that they're being produced by a car driving through the area. However, they do not produce light in the same way that a vehicle's headlights would. There's no other roads in the direction that you'd be able to see them. The screams. Another popular occurrence people often report is hearing blood-curdling screams all throughout Penn Mountain Forest, centered mostly around the cemetery. People say that the screams of a woman can be heard at random hours of the night. They've been reported in other areas, but mostly near the cemetery. The theory explaining this is, back in the 60s and 70s, a man by the name of Bernard Barney Hatch, who lived nearby, would kidnap women from the surrounding areas of New Hartford and Utica. He'd bring them into the woods and kill and torture and bury them there. They were only ever to pin one crime on him, and that was the murder of Mary Rose Turner, April 26, 1973. Hatch killed and dragged the dead body of Turner up nearby Potato Hill Road with his car. He then buried her body in the woods alongside the road at an intersection. He's currently serving a life sentence in state prison, but many believe he's responsible for other unsolved murders of women and children in the area during that time. The screams are said to be that of his many victims, who never got the justice they deserved. The rocking chair. Drive up the rocky dirt path, and you'll stumble upon a cemetery. This cemetery dates back to the late 1800s, has a ton of graves from this time period. There was once a rocking chair here. It's been said that anybody who sat in it would die within the next 24 hours. Today, it's no longer there. The story goes that a young lady had gone there with a group of friends. Some of them had dared her to sit in the chair. Knowing the legend and dismissing it, she sat in it anyways. The next day, that girl was killed in a car accident. The father, after talking with one of the grief-stricken friends, had learned about the dare and the legend. He went up to the cemetery and destroyed the chair, so no other parents would lose their children to this chair. Evidence of this is scarce and almost non-existent. However, many do report that there was in fact a rocking chair there at one point, and it had simply gone missing. No one seems to know what happened to it. There's also signs posted around the cemetery saying that there are security cameras in use, 2 of which can be seen mounted on trees. They seem to be pointed in the corner where the chair supposedly was, and it could be argued that they were put there to deter vandalism, which unfortunately seems commonplace there. That, however, does not explain why they'd be focused on that corner in particular. Miscellaneous occurrences. These events are not popularly reported or experienced by a great number of people that visit here, but a few people have shared these stories with myself and others, so I believe they deserve to be listened to in some fashion. Hatch's Pond, nicknamed after Barney Hatch, has had numerous legends surrounding it. Stories of it being used at some point by the Mafia, which had a large presence in Utica for years. The alleged body dumpings are plentiful. However, no evidence to support this has ever come up. According to some, the whole force was used at one point or another by the Mafia for various reasons, since it was remote and far away from the city. Not only a story of a local tow truck company pulling a car to a pond could possibly have a connection to this, but no evidence of human remains were found in it, and it was deemed most likely that somebody had stolen the car from a dealership and dumped it here. This is somewhat supported by the fact that it was a relatively expensive vehicle at the time, and reportedly had extremely low miles. No evidence of it being used for a body dump ever surfaced. There is a small collection of structures near the pond, dubbed the Hermit's Village. Many people have claimed that a hermit had once lived in these small structures and would be aggressive toward people traveling by. There's no recent evidence of a person living there, and it most likely was used as a sort of hunting area back in the day. Basements of long-forgotten structures can also be found in the surrounding area. Reports of lights following you up the trail, I'm sure, also pop up from time to time. A friend told me that lights appear behind you, only for no vehicle to pass by. There's only a few places to turn off, most towards the beginning of it, so a vehicle turning onto another offshoot of the trail is unlikely. People have also reported speaking to a man in a military uniform, thought to be the ghost of the Baron who was buried in his. I've also been told of a man in an old white pickup truck offering to give you a ride to a party that's happening further up the trail, When you make your way up the trail, you don't find a single soul, let alone a party, and the truck seems to have disappeared. Also, sprinkled throughout the state forest, there are concrete structures with no clues as to what they once were. Most likely they're basements or foundations of some type, and there is originally a Welsh settlement in the area, which would explain why they might be there. There's plenty of what appears to be more modern construction as well, and it's anybody's best guess as to what they are. These are just a small collection of some of the things that sort of happen up here, and if you're from the area and have your own stories, please feel free to share them. If you've never been before and are willing to take a drive there, you won't be disappointed if ghost hunting is your type of thing. Four-year-old suffering visual and audio hallucinations. There's a very real chance my 4-year-old is a schizophrenic, but doctors tell me this is rare. I've ran her through a battery of tests this past week. MRIs and spinal tap, and now injecting her with steroids because of a gut feeling on a possible result that may take weeks to come back. To begin with, this started Friday, August 28th. We sent the child to bed, and while the rest of the family watched Bill and Ted face the music. In the middle of this, she began to bang on the door that she couldn't all of a sudden open. Happens to her sometimes, probably because she's a kid and not very coordinated. She never freaks out about it, just calls for us. That day she was definitely perturbed and frantic, then started talking about the cloudy people. We didn't really put much stock in it, and she ended up sleeping with us that night. We even forgot about this until we needed to start piecing everything together later. The next real event was at a Target on Saturday. My son and I had been hunting action figures, and the wife and the 4-year-old tagged along with us. Everything was fine until she saw a Spider-Man toy. Marvel Spider-Man Far From Home web-shot spider bolt that has some rubbery webbing on it, and she started freaking out about the spiders being on her. Thought she was just being a silly kid and thought the webbing equals spiders, and after we pretended to brush the spiders off and started to become clingy. But things worked out, and we ended up at Walmart and bought her a Blue's Clues stuffed you. Stuffed you? Stuffed animal, maybe? I mention this because I remember her calmly and rationally making a decision between blue and magenta, and she chose magenta. The next day I was out of the house mostly until the evening. Made a run to Home Depot for some soil for the wife's garden, and brought her along. I had time to interact with her in the car because I didn't feel like driving, and I tried to get her to say please when she asked for a snack. She was being stubborn and was going to say please, but then decided against it. We ended up at a different Walmart, and she saw this Trolls microphone that plays the same song over and over again. For 20 minutes, she incessantly played it and only gave it up at the register. I never put it back in her hands, and I gave her some candy that we bought her to make her kind of forget about it on the ride home. Again, I tried to get her to say please, and now she refused outright. Back at home within an hour, the hallucinations started. We started giving them names of cartoon characters. Tyrone and Lady Tasha from Backyardigans. They go often on adventures and never remember cloudy people. I checked my Plex records, and she had watched them on 8/26. A few days prior to the event on Friday. Prior to this, she had watched them on 8/21, and before that in March. The cloudy people were everywhere, and she began to talk to gibberish and nonsense. A lot of verbal diarrhea. Imagine a very hyper child on speed. Her heart rate increased, and she began to walk back and forth and open and closing doors. We tried to get her to sleep, and she would just not relax. Even when we had her in the bed, we were just definitely concerned. Thought maybe she had too much candy. Although this is not normal behavior for her, even when she has had too much sugar in the past. I finally got up and took her to another room and held her close to me and asked her to relax and close her eyes. Started to hear the rhythmic breathing of sleep, but the eyes never closed. They were wide open and doing, but blinking rapidly like an REM sleep. The next morning she slept until past 12, but ended up waking her, just wanting to make sure she was okay. She got herself up and seemed pleasant, but then the incessant verbal chatter started again. Then we noticed she was having a conversation for the first time. Not like a child, having like a make-believe one, where they're talking to themselves and maybe answering the questions too. She seemed like she was being interviewed or interrogated. She would give answers to non-existent questions, and I sent her on a neighborhood walk with my oldest daughter. Along with the way she discussed moving and finding a new house, but not with my daughter, with the voices she was hearing. Upon their return, we set up a virtual meeting with the pediatrician while we waited for our appointment with the real pediatrician. I also learned during this meeting that my daughter had bought her ice cream from a Quick Stop. But immediately after arriving, the child had forgotten that she had eaten it. The virtual pediatrician was the first to point out this behavior seemed typical for a 4-year-old, and yeah, I've seen hyper 4-year-olds and agreed, but not for her. I still thought maybe a sugar reaction. We started to see her talk with a changed, higher-pitched baby voice. The doctor noticed it as well, and then noticed her talking to herself and then answering the cloudy people. She told him that that's who she was talking to. He recommended we take her to a child psychiatrist, but told us to visit the pediatrician so we can make the recommendation. Soon after, she's bouncing off the walls and with hyper fears and anxiety. Spikes on the floor said by the cloudy people, among other things. Started to be filled with dread as a parent, but still thinking it was sugar, I decided to take her on a walk to tire her out. Or stop giving her sugar completely for a minute. So we went to Target, and she found that microphone we bought, and she proceeded to use it over an hour straight, on the drive and at Target until we saw the same toy again. Once she saw the webbing, she threw herself on the floor that spiders are all over her, and on my hand, and that she wouldn't let me touch her. And on the microphone, which I had to wash for her to touch again. That night was even worse than the previous night. Only now I had a 4-year-old who's regressing into herself, becoming more immature and smushing her food. That was a long night, hard to get her to sleep, and us looking at every theory in the book from PANDAS to ADHD to autism. Monday at the pediatrician. The first pediatrician only saw what she believed to be normal. The normal babbling of a 4-year-old. We assured her this was not normal for her, and when she stepped away, the conversations in trance-like answering and robotic voice began. She returned with the second pediatrician, and they observed the behavior. He remanded us to the ER immediately. He said we can do nothing for her. We wanted them to swab for strep throat to rule out PANDAS. My wife has issues with strep throat over the years, with swollen tonsils and lymph nodes. And I currently had swollen lymph nodes myself. They wouldn't, and we suspect they thought our daughter had fallen into household or recreational drugs. Leave everything like cough syrup on a high shelf in the kitchen locked up and don't do illegal drugs or prescribed medications. So we went to the hospital, where till today she's been through a litany of tests. She has baffled and scared quite a few doctors, and today left what seemed to be a very sure of her psychologist with the case of the I don't knows. She also started with this thing that, she started with the she seems normal talk. Then we mentioned the cloudy people, saw the terror in my daughter's eyes, and then began to just lose her shit from that moment. We think it's stress-related, but they won't let her out of the hospital, and the neurologist gave us the hard sell on steroids. She'd seen her child in trance-like states and endured the psychologist and, assured the psychologist that there was a real problem. I hated agreeing to the steroids, but I just wanted her home to rest, and the hospital had been traumatic. She's been referred to the nursing staff as killers, and her hospital gown as jail clothes, and described a jail area somewhat in the hospital. But here's the punchline. I decided to talk to her to get through to her, ask her about the cloudy people and who they were and what they were doing. And she said the name George. I said, "What does George do?" "George and Harold make comic books," she said. "Captain Underpants is a favorite of my son. It just so happened she watched it at the hospital, and I'm getting nowhere." So frustrated, I said, "George and Harold are on the TV. It's Captain Underpants. Tyrone and Lady Tasha are backyardigans. And they're on TV too. They aren't real." She gets quiet and whispers, "They have the same name." "The same name as who? George and Harold?" "No, as the George at home and Georgie, the fucking dog, who's at rescue off the streets, whom we named Georgie because our child, who was still crawling at the time, just said the name out of thin air. We thought it was cute and assumed it was from a cartoon and thought nothing of it." She stopped talking soon after that. We feared autism and we took her to speech therapy. Eventually started talking again. But if that wasn't enough, my wife's sister watched her today at the hospital. When the sister was leaving, she told my wife that she also talked to ghosts as a child. My wife realizes that, well, she had repressed those memories. Now I've been home without my wife for 5 nights, still a skeptic and jumping at every strange noise I hear in the night. The lady in my kitchen and that pounding noise every night. Without further ado, I suppose I should start like when I was young. I lived with my family, my parents and an older sister, in a trailer home on a plot of land behind my grandparents' house, which was, no kidding, a large 2-story pink house. It was in Texas, in Galveston County to be more exact. Behind my parents' and grandparents' property was a family with their own business there, which was a large U-Haul rental place. The family that lived there was a wife, 2 daughters, and husband. I won't be naming any names except one, the husband. There was a man named Timothy Gribble. Now, Timmy here was a convicted murderer, strangled and raped 2 women, and he was given the death penalty and executed back in 2000. I lived in the trailer up until maybe 4th grade, then ended up moving to a pink house to house sit it, since my grandparents moved to a new home for retired folks. Now I'm mainly just trying to at least place the setting. Perhaps it'll help to bring some understanding as to what I experienced over the years on these properties. Even when I was a kid and moved into the pink house, or even visiting, I always felt off being there, like something just wasn't right. Nothing really happened though until I was in 6th or 7th grade. First it was a weird thing with the front door, and it would just open on its own. At first it would just open slowly and stay open, easily explainable, right? A door unlocked, old house, town sitting on a fault line, so the foundation wasn't exactly the best. It never really weirded me out, and what was weird was one night, around 8 or 9 p.m., I'm just watching TV in the living room. The door just opened and closed itself quickly twice. Didn't creep me out right away because I figured, oh, it's just my cousin, and he said he's coming by to pick up an inhaler for my mother. They both have asthma. He was known to be a little bit of a jokester toward me, so whatever, I'll just see if it was him. I looked outside and my driveway was empty. Asked my mother if he had just came in, and she said no. So I put it out of my mind and moved on. Fast forward further down the road, I laid down for bed and I started hearing a faint noise, like a hand faintly pounding on the wall or floor. From there, I would hear this every night. I disregarded it since nobody else could hear it, and said I was just imagining it. It bothered me for a while, and I just accepted that it won't go away and I'll just once again move on. Figured if there's something, it's just doing its thing, and as long as it left me alone, I'd leave it alone. Then the night I actually saw something I couldn't explain, and to this day my family swears I just imagined it. It was around 3 a.m. I'm in the living room playing a video game on the TV. I want to say this was around when Nintendo 64 was around, because I kept remembering the game Killer Instinct Gold from that night. So I go to the kitchen to get a drink, and I look across the room, and there was a figure standing there, and I froze. My dining room and kitchen is a bit large, and I'm standing at the entrance next to the staircase, looking across the dining room past the bar into the kitchen. And the figure was a woman, and she was a slim build, wearing a long nightgown, and had no head. There wasn't a bloody stump where the neck was, just there was no head, and as I said, I froze. I wasn't truly scared, just unsure how to react. Just wasn't processing what it was that I was seeing. Turned around, went back to the living room, and just sat down confused. I kept thinking about it. I kept pondering. Did I really see that, and was that real? So I got up and went back in there, and she was still there, never moved. Just standing there. I went back in and out several times, and she didn't leave. And I finally said, "Okay, you stay there. I don't care what you do." And I'm going to my room and going to sleep. No response, not even a wave and nothing. So I went to bed and laid there all night until 6 a.m., terrified, wondering what if she'd come up here into my room. Thankfully, that was the last I saw her. There were other experiences that happened in that house, and even in my old trailer home. A couple of weeks after that, we're doing some remodeling work in my room, so I wound up having to sleep a few nights in my parents' room on the floor. And as was every night, the faint pounding noise continued. Again, I would ignore it and just sleep, and that night the noise grew a little louder each time. It stayed faint, but grew slightly louder each time. I would ask the parents, "You hear that?" And they would say, "No, of course I didn't." As it continued, it finally stopped for a little while. It was oddly quiet, and I figured, okay, finally guess it got tired. After about 10 or 15 minutes, something slammed into my parents' closed doors to the room hard. It sounded like somebody just ran head first into it, and trust me, it was loud. I sat up and said, "Okay, I know damn well I was not the only one who heard that." The parents agreed. My father and I checked the whole house, even her attic, which is not a place you really want to go into since the house is so old. Nothing, and no one was there with us. The noise went back to its faint self that night after that. To this day, I think about this all the time. I have had other things happen, but these two events stick out all the time. I just still don't know what to think about them. I don't really know if this woman in the kitchen was a victim of that Gribble guy or someone else. I just don't know, and I wish I actually had some evidence to even prove it all happened. Either way it happened, I guess nothing else I could say there. Again, I have other things to share, which I will later on in a couple more threads. But what's everybody else's take on this? Some days I wish I did imagine it all. Evil spirit or demonic encounter a friend had. Years ago, when I was between 18 and 20, I was in a little metal band with 4 others, and this incident happened to our bass player in his home, which is also where we would gather for practice. However, in a way it involved all of us. And again, this is his telling of the incident. This was in South Texas in December. It happened sometime late at night, according to him. Started at 11, maybe 12. He woke up randomly and just felt compelled to look out of his window. He was sleeping on the living room couch that night. When he looked, he saw a shadowy figure crossing his yard. He said it looked like it was moving quite erratically. His example was like how the doctor moved around in the remake of House on Haunted Hill. Thinking he was just tired and half awake, he thought nothing of it and assumed it was just one of his neighbors. They were known to do that often, and he went back to sleep. His neighbor did that often, huh? Shortly after that, he woke up with this feeling like somebody was holding him down and making it hard for him to breathe, which sure sounds like sleep paralysis, except, well, he claimed the whole time he could hear chanting and whispering around him, and no one was in the room with him. It eventually stopped abruptly after a minute or two. He sat up confused and terrified and got a drink of water and tried to go back to sleep, which happened eventually. And shortly after that, it all happened again, same feeling, same chanting and whispering. He always said he never knew and could understand exactly what was being chanted and whispered. Regardless, this episode ended and he once again was scared and confused, and he chalked this up to maybe he had a bad dream and managed to go back to sleep. Then it all happened once more. He woke up like something was holding him down, making it hard to breathe. The chanting and whispering all around him again. Though this time, something new happened. He said he looked over next to him on the couch, and standing in front of the Christmas tree was a short, about 4-foot-tall, shadowy figure that appeared to be cackling at him. He wasn't making any other noise. This went on for what he said felt like forever this time, and when it stopped, he said forget sleeping, went to his bedroom and played his bass guitar the rest of the night. Good man. Also, for the remainder of the night, coming from the direction of his sister's room, he would hear 2 knocks every couple of minutes. He didn't go back to sleep until the next night due to this. When the band and I gathered the next day for practice, he told us what happened, and of course we all laughed and said, "Yeah, right, you're full of shit." Then he showed us that in his yard he found what looked like footsteps. They were tracked through his yard all the way to his front door. And the steps were just that, footsteps, made from shoes, but no defining features to them. No imprint on the bottom of a shoe, just plain. Then when we sort of told around what time this started happening, that it was about 3 a.m. when the last attack happened. We all froze because of what we realized we were doing that night. Our singer woke up randomly and was praying. Our lead guitarist woke up and just couldn't go back to sleep, feeling like something was wrong and off, and I, for no reason, just woke up and turned on my lamp and started reading the Bible. We all realized that all of us at the same time he was experiencing the incident had gotten up at 3 a.m. and either prayed, read a Bible, or felt a sense of dread. Strange metal band. And our drummer wasn't there at the time. He never said if he did anything that night as well, but the story had spooked him. The Oz Effect Experience. That silence feeling, being watched. Yeah, I'd recommend you listen to it. Last summer I had this feeling, in the middle of the woods in a spot in the Caribou goldfields. Caribou, maybe. Where a triple murder and robbery took place in the 1860s. I was on the Old North Trail in an area called Murderer's Gulch, on a secondary road into an abandoned mine. This place is deep in grizzly bear country, in thick forest. It was a hot, sunny summer day. No people live within miles of this place. One can Google for the story of the murders and robbery. My girlfriend and I wanted to check the area out after hearing the story. The main roads washed out, so we took the Old North Trail. That's where the robbery took place over a century ago, which is now an old deactivated logging road down to the opposite side of the main road past the washout. That leads into the abandoned mine. The main road had been totally washed out at Murderer's Creek several years earlier. The secondary road we took was not great, which had small washouts and was very overgrown. We spent 2 days clearing and fixing the road, and on the second day, we decided to walk the rest of the road, to get a sense of whether it was worth continuing trying to fix said road to get down to the abandoned mine in my truck. But anyway, before we went down on foot, my girlfriend wandered down the road a bit and came running back as I was digging away past a small washout in the road. She asked me if I heard that sound, in quotes. I had not heard anything as I was shoveling, just filling the small washout to a point to get my truck further down said road. We walked down to the abandoned mine to see how much work was ahead of us. I had my 45-70 lever-action guide gun with me, since we were in bear country. It was a steep grade with a cliff down to the mine site, hundreds of feet below, and thick forest on the other side of the road. Basically, it's a bottleneck the whole way down for about 1.5 miles. We got down, looked around the abandoned mine for about an hour, before heading back up the steep road to my truck, and on the way back I had an off vibe. I stopped before the V onto the bypass road that we came down. I felt something was off, like we were being watched. A big danger feeling where my hair stood up. My girlfriend asked if everything was okay, and I said, yeah, not wanting to freak her out. But I stood still listening, and I could tell she felt it too. And that's when I noticed it was silent. No sounds, no birds chirping, just silence. Then a squirrel lost its shit, chirping the danger sounds that they do. Then we heard 3 very loud knocks up the road back to the truck coming from the woods. Loud and spaced about a second apart between each knock. It was like somebody smashing a big rock on a tree not far behind the tree line. This being up the way that we had to go to get back to my truck. We kept walking toward it. There was no choice if we were to get out of there. It was hot and steep, and there was no way we could run due to the grade of the hill. Then we heard something. It was following us off to the left in the forest. Then 5 loud knocks 200 meters up the road from the last knocks. We were in the bottleneck, steep cliff to the mine on the right, close knocks to the forest on the left. I looked at my girlfriend and said, we have to get the fuck out of here. We pushed up the steep road, me keeping an eye on the forest, ready to shoot whatever it was that was following us. It was the scariest walk of my life, but we got to the truck and got out of there. The sound my girlfriend heard prior to heading down turned out to be the same knocking sound we heard in the walk back up. The man at the end of the hall. So this is absolutely something that really happened to me. I was around 11 or 13, and also, fair warning, it's a bit of a long one. I grew up in a tiny town in northern Michigan with my family. My parents had split when I was 7, so it was just me, my mom, her partner, and my siblings, except the 2 oldest who had already moved out. I finally got my own room after the oldest left, and I was so excited, but honestly, for the first couple of months I didn't actually sleep in there. I was too freaked out, and I always ended up sneaking into my sister's room to sleep. But right before we moved out of that house, I decided I was going to finally sleep in my room alone. My bed was placed so that if I lay flat on my back, I'm facing the doorway. And that particular night, I left the door wide open because it was a sticky, warm summer night and didn't have AC. Sometime after midnight, I woke up, and I couldn't tell you the exact time, and I didn't really check, and even if I did, I doubt I'd remember. Turned onto my back and glanced toward the hallway. And there he was, a dark, shadowy figure, tall, thin, wearing what looked like a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat, just standing there at the top of the stairs, still and silent. And for a second, I thought it was my mom's partner playing a prank on me. The shape wasn't right, though. Silence wasn't right either. My heart was pounding, and I yanked the blanket over my head like a little kid and eventually fell back asleep. A year later, we're living in a small trailer in the woods, and that's when I had the first dream. I was back at the old house, and I remember walking through the hallway and thinking I'm home, and felt so safe and familiar. Everything was exactly how it had been. Cluttered shelves, crooked curtain rod, my messy little room, and I wandered through the house feeling peaceful until I woke up. Didn't think much of it. About a month later, I had another dream. I'm in the same house, but this time it was just different. Some furniture was missing, bookshelf in my living room, big clock in the kitchen, the floor rug by the stairs. Felt emptier and less like home. I woke up pretty unsettled. After a few months passed and I dreamed again, my house was missing more things now and it felt cold and unwelcoming. I wanted to leave, but something kept me walking deeper inside and I saw it. The same tall shadow figure from that night. He moved slowly down the upstairs hall, almost floating. I felt my throat close up and I wanted to scream, but nothing came out and I woke up. The last dream happened while I was staying at my grandparents' place. I was back at the old house again, but now it was completely empty. The bare wooden floors echoed under my feet. There was no furniture, no light, and just shadows. That's when a figure appeared in front of me. Not the same one with the hat, and this one was harder to see, almost like the edges were blurred, and he asked me softly, "You okay?" I told him I wanted to leave, and he held out his hand and said, "I can take you home." Something in my gut twisted, and I knew it wasn't right, and I said no. He kept promising, whispering things I can't quite remember now. About how I could stay where everything was familiar, how I didn't have to be afraid anymore, but I turned away and I woke up. The next day I told my sister everything about the shadow figure and all the dreams. And at first we joked that maybe I had some weird sixth sense, and years later I watched a video about shadow people. And that's when it clicked. A few more years after that, my boyfriend, whose family has all kinds of supernatural stories, explained what it might have been. He said sometimes these things use dreams to creep closer. First they give you something familiar and safe, and then little by little they strip it away until the only thing that feels safe is them. And if you ever agree to go with them, well, you're not really in control anymore. He told me I did the right thing, saying no, and telling someone. Apparently, sharing your dream with another person can break whatever hold these things try to build with you, and that's why he said people in the old days always told their dreams to someone else in the morning. And honestly, I've never seen that shadow man again. It does sound nice to say the dreams you had to someone in the morning. Sweet dreams. Tell them to someone.
Good evening and welcome back to Paranormal M. Help us work the algorithm by dropping a comment below, respond to stories, or leave your own sixth sense on the matter. Your narrator enjoys reading your comments, good or bad. Get ready for a journey of awe and wonder. Roundabout Ghost. This happened only like an hour ago. So I'm a graveyard manager at a casino in my small town. Right outside the casino, there's a roundabout. And it's had several accidents over the 2 years it's been here. We've been pretty dead tonight due to a thick fog, so I went out to check the parking lot and get a bit of fresh air. As I was getting ready to go back, I looked out the roundabout and I saw someone standing in the centerpiece of the roundabout staring up at the road in the neighboring town. I thought that this was odd as it's like 2 a.m. and foggier than Silent Hill, so I called out to the person to see if they were in trouble. Got no response. I then looked at my phone for like half a second, and when I looked up, they were just gone. This kind of weirded me out a bit, as there's no way they could just disappear at that point, as even with the fog, I could make out the body and clothes, but looking back on it, I never did see a face. Just last summer, we had an accident where a trucker lost control of his rig and came barreling down the same road the figure was staring at, and ended up killing 2 people in a car in the roundabout. So I'm wondering if there's a connection there. The little casino I work at is haunted. I work grave shift at a little casino in a small town, and everyone's had something spooky happen at one point. It's pretty common to hear your name called, both the staff and the guest have it happen. It's kind of unnerving during grave, when you only have one other person working and almost no guests. We call the ghost Charlie, and he's pretty peaceful, calling names and sometimes screwing with the bathroom doors. Recently, though, it feels like something else is there, and I see shadow people darting around the machine sometimes. gets pretty cold when this happens, and it feels different from Charlie, so I doubt this is him. It is possible for another ghost to just show up, and I have a lot of paranormal stuff happen in my life, but this just started like a month ago with the shadow people. Anyway, I just wanted to share this and see if anyone had any insight or had any other workplace ghost stories. One of my many encounters. This one is mild. In 3rd grade, I went to the Whaley House, which is considered the most haunted place in America. I had no idea it was haunted otherwise. I'd never have gone. Been quote-unquote sick that day or whatever, you know. So I pointed at a woman tending the garden. She was on the more pale side, and I thought I could almost see through her. I wondered why that was. I raised my hand and I said, "Is she okay? She looks kinda sick." The teacher said, "Stop playing games." I said, "I'm serious. She's right there, working on her garden." My mother said if I read about it, I wouldn't have come. Then asked if I was messing around, and I said no. My teacher accused me of stirring up trouble and sarcastically asked what she looked like. The tour guide's face went white. They asked if I'd been there or read anything. I said, "No, why is everybody being mean to me?" I had described Anna Whaley to a T, who was sometimes seen tending her garden. I fucking lost it and burst into tears as the teacher reprimanded me for sort of hurting the other kids. My mom was there and grabbed my hand and said that she believed me and that I needed to leave. My mom was a chaperone, so she called my dad, who rushed over while the kids were with the teacher, and she brought me one of those swirly rainbow lollipops. It is terrifying to be yelled at by a teacher, as well as being told you see something scary. I applaud my parents for backing me up. And who the fuck takes 3rd graders to the Whaley House? A few of my more minor experiences. I have too many to count. The other day I was playing Dungeons & Dragons. I was rolling for a saving throw so my character wouldn't die. Right as I was about to say I failed it, my dice that had just stopped rolling for 30 seconds rolled over to the side. From I think like 9, it just barely failed. It rolled to 15. My DM thought I was fucking around. Safe bet, to be honest. Then I saw my reaction over Discord, so I saved and we won, still dumbfounded. I was cooking something and the oven fan turned on randomly. I was like, hey, kinda coming in clutch, you know? Then something pushed my laptop and a bunch of magazines really hard off the counter and threw a teapot across the room. I was like, oh shit, I need some sleep. Until my mom asked me why I didn't clean up from the night before and why the tea kettle was in the middle of the living room. This one is the big boy, the most unsettling. It used to be every night, but now not as much. I'm asleep. When my door opens, the doorway is foggy and there's an orange and red light flashing in the background. In walks one of the best-looking men I've ever seen. He wore a simple but classy black 3-piece suit. His black hair is slicked back. He has a fantastic face and ice blue, almost gray eyes. He walks in and I can't move. He stands over me just looking at me for a few seconds, before leaning down and kissing me on the head. Then he says, "I'll see you soon enough," before leaving and closing the door gently. In each of these situations, I've tried to find other reasons, and no, there aren't any. One of my many encounters with the paranormal. Today I was telling my friend about how on a school field trip outside of a haunted house, who the fuck takes 3rd graders there, and about how I saw something like a woman or something, but I just remember being yelled at for seeing stuff that wasn't there and upsetting other children, quote unquote. For those listening, I believe this is the same post from the same person, but perhaps elsewhere. What my mom said was that there was a cemetery nearby that they wanted us to go into. I kept saying no because she wanted me to hold her hand and I didn't want to. They were like, who? And apparently the description looked like a child buried there that had died from some illness. I was losing it and getting in trouble. My teacher said I already read about it and wanted to make a fuss. My mom was there and said if she had read about it, she wouldn't have come. Fast forward probably like over a decade. I finally set foot in that cemetery. I immediately walk over to the tree in there, and it had names because that's fucked. As I was looking, I had my hands at my sides, and what felt like a little child's hand started holding my right hand. As stereotypical as it sounds, the hand was colder than the normal air. When it disappears, I turn to my right, and there's a child's grave, with flowers, candles, toys, a little girl. I realized today that she did end up holding my hand. They make good stories, but it's scary to have these interactions and see, feel, and hear stuff. It makes your blood run cold. Or maybe my mama just raised a bitch and it isn't that scary. I don't know what he is, but he definitely wasn't human. I work in retail, seen a lot of shit. There was this man that walked in and I got a chill and my chest tightened. I got frequent panic attacks, but it was different. He was bad news. Of course, he approaches me out of everybody else. The conversation went like this. Me trying not to throw up. Hi, can I help you? Him staring at me with a terrifying, huge smile. I need help with my phone. Me. Actually, all I can do is make you an appointment. So he says okay, and I make him an appointment. I hate working with him, and I want to run to the back. He is with his wife, who's normal, and I got good vibes from. Lady, run. She could become a skeleton in his closet. He was evil. Still makes me nervous and feel like I'm being watched. I just freaked myself the fuck out. I tell him to have a nice day, and he said, thanks, you too. So I laughed and said I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic. He looked me in the eyes. Eyes are literally the windows to the soul for me. I look in someone's eyes and I see their darkest secrets. Any emotions they felt in the past, their thought process, and sense past trauma. I know it sounds fucking insane. Also intentions. I thought it was normal, but when I found out it wasn't, and my grandma said I had the gift, I was like, no, I don't. That's not possible. I figured I was just really observant or something, but no. I say shit I had no way of knowing about strangers. I feel like they're lying despite feeling genuine shock from them. I don't guess numbers and shit, but I know what people have been through. Strangers. Once I look into their eyes. I got tested for schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders at least 5 times. They call it an active imagination, but it's accurate. Always more on than later if you got questions. Behind those eyes was evil and hate, nauseated me, gave me goosebumps and a shiver on a hot day. His smile got bigger and he said, you know when you ask someone if they're being sarcastic, nice men like me get angry. I don't know how I was calm on the outside. That felt somehow like a threat. I said goodbye and walked calmly to the back of the store and then had a full-blown panic attack. They aren't uncommon, but I never had, customers be that blunt. I've only genuinely given a fuck about 2 of them in my entire time in retail, so this was a big deal. He scared the shit out of me. My manager sent me home because I kept throwing up, not like that was uncommon, as I was kind of bulimic, but never have I at work or in public bathrooms, as I'm a huge germaphobe. But before they had said a man asked for me, I refused to help him. Normally I'm trying to get a raise. and unless they make me feel unsafe, will try to help the customer. They sent my friend, who's 6'3" and ripped and protective as fuck, over me. He said he got really bad vibes too. He did the guy that gave me the tech help, but not on the same level. My friend, who had just gotten off work, saw me and he walked to me in my car because I was not laughing or cracking jokes, but I was completely serious for once, and it scared him. I'm like the equivalent of the class clown in the store. I'm normally the comedic relief in tight situations, as the eye thing tells me how to make people feel certain emotions, like happiness, and make them laugh. Bad ones as well, but I've rarely tapped into them. I'm depressed, so I want to keep others from feeling like me. At the same time, I have a general disdain for other people. I know, a weird combo. I care about other people, but I don't want to be around them or interact with them. Being around them is exhausting because whenever I look into somebody's eyes, it's like an insight check in D&D. I have no control over when to do it. It makes people think I'm not paying attention, but I can't pay attention and look somebody in the eyes. But I couldn't look away. I was stuck looking into those evil eyes. This was not just the average dislike I have for people. This man was bad fucking news. His smile seemed too big to me and was more menacing, like a dog baring. I don't know how it's spelled, I'm dyslexic. Yeah, baring its teeth at you. You spelled it right, ma'am. He didn't feel human. His wife was lovely and a sweetheart. She was normal and had a beautiful, genuine smile. She was oblivious to him. Can't explain it. Other people saw a normal smile and human eyes, but I know what I saw. His eyes looked normal, but were not human. His smile was too big. Haven't told anyone because it would freak the people that believe in this stuff out, or they wouldn't believe me. I figure people on this sub would understand. I'm not sure what he is, but he sure as fuck isn't human. I hope his wife is okay. She was so sweet. The Glowing Lady, a Boy and His Father. The story is about the Glowing Lady. When I was around 10 or 11, I stayed over at a friend's house, and we were feeling a little bit rebellious, so we decided to go outside past midnight, because we thought that was cool for some reason. Anyway, my friend and I left his house and went on to the open street in the neighborhood, and at the end of his street there was this old house no one lived in for a long time. It just sat there pretty much the whole time I lived there. So we looked toward that house and we saw a lady in a white dress. And since it was so long ago, I can't really remember a lot of the details, but I do remember her glowing really bright like car headlights pointed at us. Since it was so bright, I couldn't see her face, but I knew it was a woman and she had this dress on. She started coming towards us. So me and my friend, being kids, said to each other, "Run. She's gonna get us." We laughed it off and ran inside his house. And I got the idea to check out the window to see if she was still coming, and she was gone, and that was it. We just got on the PlayStation and forgot all about it. Now, years later, when I'm nearing 17 years old, me and my family go pay a visit to the old friends and the neighborhood. And when we reached the end of that street where the old house was, I jokingly said, "Nobody ever lives in that house." And my mom tells me, "Well, yeah, because people have told me a long time ago a woman that used to live there was having a wedding, and her husband never showed up and left her. Then she came home, killed her kids in the bathroom, and killed herself." And everything clicked in my brain, and I just froze. This second story is about a boy and his father. My mother has this friend, we'll call her Beth, that had all these stories about this guy and his son that she sees in her home from time to time. Nobody believes when she tells them that she's constantly telling my mom that she just wishes somebody else would see them. Anyway, she described both of them as wearing a plain white t-shirt and blue jeans. But the odd thing was, they both have no head, like it stops at their shoulders. But she said that she sees them, but they just stand still and look in her direction. She wakes up and sees them, or they'd just be vibing in her house, and she told my mom that they don't scare her because they just stand there, and understandably, it was probably their home before hers. Moving along, one day a friend of Beth comes over for dinner. Beth tells her that she has to use the restroom, so she goes and takes care of that. And when she gets back to her friend on the couch, the friend says to Beth, "I thought your husband gets off in an hour." Beth says, "Well, he does." And the friend says, "Well, I just saw him walk to the back bedroom and I said hi, and he just kept walking and didn't answer me." Beth realizes what just happened, and she starts clapping out of excitement and asks, "What was he wearing?" And her friend says, "A white shirt and blue jeans." And Beth gets excited and says, "Yes, finally, somebody else finally saw him." Because she was starting to think maybe she was just going a little bit crazy. In conclusion, one day Beth finally says, "I'm tired of this. I understand you once lived here, but this is my house now and you can no longer stay here." And then she stopped seeing them. Unforeseen creatures. When I was 12 years old in about 2013, I moved to this old house, built in about the 1940s. No one had lived in this house in over 30 years, and it was the first fall I've seen at this house. I was taking trash out to our back porch, and from there I could see a tree line that's normally very green and hard to see through, but seeing how it's fall and the leaves are almost all fallen. As I walk out to take trash out, I look at the tree line, about 30 or 40 yards away, and I see 4 to 5 of these at least 7-foot-tall pure white humanoids with no faces. I stand there in awe, not knowing what to think. It honestly looks like they're talking with hand gestures, but I couldn't hear anything. Now that I think of it, I heard nothing at the time, no birds, bugs, or even trees moving with visibly moving branches. I screamed, "Hey!" to which the creatures became motionless, like a statue. Then I proceeded to ask, "Who are you?" To which I stand there for a second before the creatures dispersed. Now I could see far into the woods, and they all went their separate way, not even hearing a leaf or twig crack when they fled. They quote-unquote ran off so quick that it seemed like a blur. To be honest, after that I completely forgot about that experience, until later that night. As I said, I was young, and at this time my mom worked night shift and wasn't there for when I screamed at these creatures. FYI, I lived on essentially farmland, but my neighbors could easily walk up my driveway in a matter of 2 to 3 minutes. So later that night around 9 p.m. I heard knocking on my back door, the one where it leads to the back porch where the creatures were. And I thought maybe my mom told the neighbors to check up on me, so I go check it out. I go to the back door, turn the back porch light on, and open it to where no one was there. Casually, I chalked it up to maybe one of my dogs hitting the door or something around it. Now, after this knocking kept coming from the door, and it was weird, because every time I rounded the door to where I could see the back door, the knocking stopped. Now, this happened a few more times every few minutes, ranging from when I turn my back from the door to when the moment I sit back on my bed, to just waiting 5 to 10 minutes before it happened again. After about an hour of this and increasing anxiety, I got fed up and I went outside to scream, "I don't know who you are, but you better stop." And to my surprise, it did for about 30 minutes. Then knocking came from around the house, on windows, doors, and walls from the outside, for about another 30 minutes. I was scared, curled in the corner of my bed. After the 30 minutes, there was one last bang beside my window that I felt like shook the house, and was shocked that the window didn't break from it. That was the end of it. Nothing for the rest of the 5 years I lived. At least, I lived there. The shocking part was the outside was old, as stated, and could honestly be broken with one good swing to the exterior. But where that final bang was, there was no sign of any impact. Honestly, I think that's what scared me the most. That this creature could full force shake my house and leave no damage. I lived in Tennessee, by the way, if this maybe helps figure out what this thing is. He was friendly. Many years ago, when I was 12, my parents got divorced. After I moved in with my mom into her new house. The house was bought from an elderly couple who couldn't live alone anymore due to the age and were sort of heading to a nursing home. At settlement, once all the paperwork was signed and T's crossed and I's dotted, the elderly couple casually brings up, "Just so you know, we think our son Daniel is still in the house and has never left." Now, it's unclear if he died in the house or just came back to stay with his elderly parents. My mom was totally sketched out by this. Fast forward a few weeks. The second floor was completely unfinished. My older brother was in trade high school at the time for a senior project, and his project was to frame out the second floor. One night, while there by himself, he was working with the bedroom door closed and his music speaker on, when he saw the handle do about a half turn and the door very slowly open about a quarter way. He ran out of the house and had my other brother come pick him up. This was the first experience. About 6 months later, he was in a bad car crash and was lucky to be alive. After many surgeries and time in the ICU, he was sent home to recover and was in bed and wheelchair for an additional 6 months with very limited movement. He and his friends have many stories of what sounded like silverware dropping into the metal kitchen sink, or a frisbee just rolling across the room, but nothing ever violent. Now for my experience. You need to know the basic layout of my house first. On the first floor, there were 2 hallways, and this formed a big L shape. My room was at the end of the short leg of the L, and the kitchen was at the end of the long leg of the L. Standing at the island in the kitchen gave you a perfect view directly down the long hallway to the intersection of where both hallways met. At that intersection was the bedroom door to my mom's room. There was also a pretty bright hall light at the intersection. One night, I was in a video game binge in my room. Honestly, I'd say 5 straight hours of playing without getting out of my chair, not even going to the bathroom. While playing, I saw something out of the corner of my eye in the intersection of the 2 hallways. It looked like a moving shadow and pretty tall. I looked over and after a few seconds I dismissed it as being our cat. The height discrepancy didn't make sense, but I wasn't too worried. I started playing again, and a minute later I saw movement again. This time I stopped and looked a bit longer, focused on where I saw movement. Nothing. I go back to playing for a few minutes, and I can see movement again. No way this is my cat at this point, and this time I won't break my line of sight from the hallway. All of a sudden I hear my mom saying, Kyle, where are you going?" She comes walking down the long hallway from the kitchen and turns toward her room, but the door was closed, as she always left it. She looked confused, turned around and surprisingly saw me sitting in the chair in my bedroom. She asked, "Did you just go into my room?" It's just so weird. We both saw the same shadow in the same spot at the same time. And over the next years, we had so many small, unexplained sounds, thumps, or out of the corner of our eye sightings. He was never violent, thankfully, or vocal, but it was always an ominous feeling. However, my mom was very unbothered by him and used to openly talk to him and just ask him how he was doing. I guess to be friendly with him. One day, my mom decided to try and help him. She said out loud, "Daniel, I'm going to where your parents went. If you want to see them, come with us in the car." We then got ready and got into the car. The nursing home where they went after they sold the house was only a 5-minute drive from our house. My mom announced every turn and road name. I'm making a left onto so-and-so road. Turn by turn, she gave directions out loud, and when we got to the nursing home, she said, "This is where they are. but I don't know what room they're in. We waited a minute and headed back home. We never really saw anything definitive again. Please help. I think I saw a ghost. Today it was a sunny day. Around 15 to 16 hours, I was talking with my girlfriend. She was on the middle of the sofa with her phone on her hand watching Instagram. On the sofa's back, there's a wall, and on the sofa's right, there's another wall, but with a door. Out of nowhere on that door, I see many white thin smokes slowly moving from the left to the right for around 2 seconds until disappearing. I stop the conversation and in a serious way tell my girlfriend that there's a ghost on the door. She keeps looking at me, not taking me seriously. And then the white smoke comes back. I tell her to look, but this time it moves from the right to the left and lasts around 1 second. This is when she looks and it's not there anymore. It was like the smoke you see from incense, soft, thin, but in a large quantity. I thought maybe it was my girlfriend's phone, but its light wasn't hitting the door. I checked the lamps nearby, I checked the zone near the door and saw nothing. I even thought about spiderwebs, but none of these move. I'm scared, guys. This isn't my first paranormal situation. Around 7 years, I saw a huge white glowy aura moving slowly on my parents' room, more than 1 meter long. My brain shut off until I realized what I'd seen. Guys, should I worry? Is this the right subreddit? Part of me is happy my girlfriend didn't see it. I'd rather think it was a hallucination than a ghost. Ask Reddit. When I moved out at 18, I got my first apartment with my ex. It was a relatively large complex and we were in the middle level. Lucky 13. We had just gotten married and we were having a lot of problems. I chalked it up to my rushing into one bad situation to avoid another. Long story. But there was something weird about the apartment that seemed to bring out the worst in us. We fought a lot and my ex was both physically and mentally abusive. I was staying up during the night so we could spend time together and sleeping during the day when he was at work. Because we fought so much, many of these nights would be spent in the living room alone surfing the internet, while he would be in the bedroom playing games or sleeping. The layout of the apartment was like this. Slightly different. Oh, it says this and this is a link, but I can't show you the link, so. Anyhow, moving on. Slightly different, but we didn't have as big of a back bathroom, but that's the same layout. We had a computer desk set up in the corner of the living room, and sitting at the desk meant your back was to the small T-shaped hallway leading to the back bathroom and spare bedroom. This is important. The back bathroom always gave me the creeps. I couldn't go back there without feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. There was a small built-in wall shelf behind the door in the back bathroom, and there was a hole in the wall. It reminded me of Silent Hill, because every time I'd see that hole, it seemed to get bigger. During many of those nights when I'd be up along the computer, I'd be browsing the internet, reading things like creepypasta, watching movies, playing games. I've always been sensitive to supernatural things, scary stuff I can't explain, if you will. I've been so scared I was literally immobilized with fear before, and I've had visual hallucinations at night many times. There was one instance that really sticks out in my mind. I don't know if it was a dream, a hallucination, or what. I was sitting at my computer desk in the dead of night reading something. But it was like the point of view was switching between myself looking at the computer and that of like a dome camera in the corner of the room watching myself at the computer and the room behind me. I'm scrolling, then the point of view switches and I'm watching myself. I see myself scrolling and I've got my chin resting on my hand. I can see that I'm reading something. The entire room is in view behind me and I can see the kitchen and dining area behind me as well and the T-shaped hallway leading to the back bedroom and bathroom. I'm just watching myself. and then I see a shadowy figure drift up the hallway and stop behind me. That's literally just behind my left shoulder. I'm watching from the aerial point of view, and I can see this figure's just resting there behind me, just over my shoulder, as if trying to read what's on my screen. It switches back to my point of view. I feel tense and cold. Then I get that weird feeling like something's watching me, then go to turn around. The point of view switches back to aerial, and I see the figure bolt down the hallway before I can turn around and see it. The point of view switches back to my own, and I'm now aware of what just happened. I'm looking behind me, nothing's there. Just turned on all the lights in the house, and then went to the master bedroom, locked the door, and laid in bed. The next thing I remember is waking up the next morning when my ex went to work. It wasn't until after that we finally moved out that I told him about the experience, and he shared with me about how the apartment as a whole made him uncomfortable and just mad all the time for no reason. I still don't even know if what I remember was real or just some weird dream. I still get uncomfortable thinking about that apartment, all the weird shit that used to happen there. Ask Reddit. When I was younger, I used to take naps upstairs, but by the time I was 8 years old, I absolutely refused to go upstairs. The upstairs had 2 large closets or attics. They ran from one side of the upstairs all the way to the other side on both sides. It was essentially a crawl space that was maybe 30 feet long. It started one day when a friend and I went crawling from one side to the other with flashlights, like kids normally do. Then I saw a girl sitting there in the corner acting like she wanted to play with us. I know a lot of people say when they see a ghost they aren't scared, just interested, but nope, I was beyond terrified. This girl looked normal, had blonde hair and nice dress, and seemed friendly. I stayed silent, kept crawling behind my friend, and got out of the closet. Told him what I saw in there. He said he didn't see it, but felt like he didn't want to go back in. Then my parents would occasionally send me upstairs to get something, and when I would go up there, I would see the doors swing open, as if they were trying to get me to come inside. I would lose toys and wouldn't be able to find them anywhere. Suddenly, my parents would be fishing out Christmas presents out of the attic, and we would find some of my toys in there. I remember being 8 years old. My parents are asleep still in the morning, and I leashed up my dog to go take on the monster in the attic. My dog, usually up for anything, refused to go off to the top step into the attic. My parents never believed me with all the weird things that happened in that house. I would get blamed for things that happened all over the house, leaving lights on, toys all over, things I knew I didn't do. Well, anyway, we moved out of there when I'm 10. Not a week passes before the new owner calls us up and asks if the house is haunted. Their daughter sleeps upstairs, and she says that she's been playing with a blonde-haired girl at night. My parents laughed at how crazy these new homeowners must be. To make an already long story short, the girl started appearing in other parts of the house for them. They kept in contact. They would look over while watching TV and see the girl sitting on their daughter's lap. They looked up on the computer the past owners of the house, found an old dressmaker that lived there, and yep, a picture of the little girl wearing one of the ladies' dresses. The family that moved in there were absolutely torn apart by the events. Got divorced, Dad stayed living in the house and ended up taking his own life in that house. The guy who died at the convenience store. I started working there in the 90s. Shortly before that, the owner's son was working, and a man rushed in to ask for a knife. He'd been in a car accident, and his girlfriend couldn't get her seatbelt off. Owner's son turned around to grab the bagel knife, and by the time he turned back, the dude was dead on the floor. His seatbelt had done something to his esophagus, crushed it, I believe. And while adrenaline helped, he suffocated and died right there at the register. I did not know this when I started working there. I found out after I asked about the things I was experiencing. Bird, you're sounding like a car backing up. I found out after I asked the things that I was experiencing, and I'd get kicked or poked in the leg or shoulder while nobody was behind me. I'd walk through cold patches that moved throughout the store, see the reflection of someone in the cooler door but turn to see nobody there. Felt like I was being watched while I was in the cooler filling sodas. But the knife, the bagel knife, while working by myself on camera with nobody else there, that knife would be gone the minute I turned around, and then I'd find it back a bit later, maybe somewhere else. The other staff said similar things were happening to them. The overnight shift was one person, and often the store was empty. The people who worked that shift heard whistling sometimes, but mostly they heard crying. Turns out the girlfriend was a teacher at my high school. Started talking to him while I worked. I let him know that she was okay, she survived, and he can let it go. And things started to calm down. I stopped getting poked. The knife stayed where I left it. Definitely the most intense experience I've ever had. My brother died in jail. Trigger warning for drug use. Noted. My brother was in solitary while in jail. He had a dental visit with the jail nurse, and he was awaiting trial on misdemeanor marijuana charges, and he was 25. He was someone with no concept of consequences, and he absolutely hated authority. When he went to prison at 18, he was told to clean the bathroom. He put the sponges on his hands and knees and just sort of crawled around just to irritate the corrections officers. I was in high school while he was in prison, and he wrote me a letter. If I died, would Les Max cry? I hope so. And that his teachers would ask where the students saw themselves in 10 years, he said, I don't see myself in 10 years. His parole didn't go well, so he finished his 5 years. It was just a multitude of misdemeanors. Then he got a job and happily worked double shifts at a gas station. They loved his work ethic. When the guy he was living with got a girlfriend, she wanted my brother out, so he found some greaseball to live with. Then the drug bust came, and my brother was caught up in it over marijuana. As he was awaiting his appearance before the court, he had his dental visit, and he'd been caught making hooch in his cell. He was put into the only cell with no camera. When you're in solitary, you get 1 hour a day to shower and clean your cell, under supervision. If you need something like shampoo, you submit a written request. If you're lucky, you get it, eventually. He was known for whistling, tapping, and drumming while in a solitary cell. 11:20 p.m., he asks for the aerosol cleaner. A corrections officer gave it to him. His rig was a rag with a toilet paper holder, and he'd written on his clothes, "You should delete yourself," as a message to the corrections officers because he despised them so much. Around 2 a.m., the aerosol can hit the floor, and the guy in the cell next door started yelling for help. He was dead already, but they called my mother to tell him that he was in critical condition at the hospital. He was on a gurney in the hallway, covered by a sheet. She just was called to identify his body. The officer who gave him the cleaner was not reprimanded, but when they mailed his stuff to us, they included the rag in the toilet paper holder. They offered to send us the video of them dragging him out of his cell and doing CPR. A friend's husband started working at that jail as a corrections officer. He said, every night the same whistling, tapping, and drumming kept happening. Everybody heard it. People would ask, "Who's that blonde guy walking around?" Several years after his death, his driver's license was found on the floor of the correction officer's storage room. I started finding pennies right away after he died. I was having dreams where I told him, "You died." He didn't believe me. Then eventually they changed. I'd be excited to see him, and then I'd say goodbye again and finally in a dream he told me he was ready to go. I still mourn, and this was over 20 years ago, but I'm still mourning, and occasionally I still find pennies. Got a good ghost story? I love a good ghost story. Let's hear yours. I've got a few, but here's a moderate one from a few years ago. I was staying at my buddy's house in Massachusetts. Right near her house is a famous old abandoned mental hospital. Naturally, we went trespassing in daylight to check it out. There were lots of buildings on this site. It was like a whole campus. Of course, the buildings were falling apart, boarded up and covered in spray paint. Some windows were boarded up, some had glass still. Some were just giant cutouts where the windows used to be. Some windows had been milky white, thick plastic coverings too. Anyway, we went upstairs, and this one building, we saw old beds and hospital-like equipment. Then we went back down the stairs to the exit. We went to go explore the rest of the campus. My friend was walking in front of me, and her friend was behind me. It was just us three girls walking in a line, and I was in the middle. We were walking against the building that we were just in, about a foot or two from beside the building, and it's an empty window. It's just basically all empty window openings, rather. The first two windows were openings in the walls. They were not covered, but you could see through into the building. But the third window was shielded in white, mostly opaque plastic wrap. My friend walked by first. Nothing unusual occurred, though. But as I was passing by the window, a forceful finger came through from behind the plastic wrap to poke me in the face. It didn't make full contact. However, it came close, about an inch or two from my cheek. And oh yes, one could audibly hear the plastic getting manipulated while the poke was in contact with it. All I said was, "Whoa," and the girl behind me witnessed it. She said, "I saw that." Craziest thing to ever happen to me, and I live in Baltimore. So living in Baltimore, there's a place called Loch Raven Reservoir, and it's out in the sticks. Quick to get to, though. Baltimore's kind of weird like that. 10 minutes one way, woods, then next the ghetto. So we would drive out to Loch Raven and smoke while driving the empty country roads. Well, on those roads is a turnoff to a park. Been a while, but I'm kind of sure it's Cromwell Park. And it's not the kind of park you think. It's more just woods with trails, and you can only get there by driving. Roads way too small and dangerous to walk. Well, me and my friend went there one night to smoke. It was about 1 a.m. and we parked in the parking lot, which again is just a few spots for cars made from gravel. In front, behind, and to the right are trees leading to nothing but more woods. To the left, I'm driving by the way, it's a field. The field goes a little more than a football field, and I would say maybe a football field wide, till you guessed it, more trees. Yes, very good. So we have a CD case, and I was breaking the bud up, and while my friend prepared the blunt. It's pretty dark out, except for some moon and starlight shining, and I just look to my left, and on the edge of the field where the trees start, I see what appears to be someone with a flashlight. It's far away, so I'm not worried about it, and just say something to my friend like, "What the fuck is somebody doing in the woods all the way out here at this time?" I continue breaking up the bud, and when I'm done, I pass it over to my friend, and he dumps it in the blunt roll and kind of just lays the CD in the dash. While I'm waiting, I look up to my left again, and now the lights are up in a tree. Not real high, just a few feet. So I comment again. Why the fuck is somebody climbing trees at this time in the middle of nowhere? He's just like, if I know. Then he starts to hear some pops going off. Now I'm like, okay, he's lighting fireworks off. So weird. The pops keep happening more and more. I had no idea that all hell was about to break loose. I'm looking over there and a flash of light turns off and the pops keep going. For some reason I had thought that, and when I thought, or rather, for some reason I had a thought, and when I thought it was my stomach, got that scared feeling. Sorry, the writing's crazy. I got that scared feeling and I said out loud to my friend, getting goosebumps thinking about this, why can't we see fireworks going off? At that exact moment, the explosion got super loud and traveled across the field towards us, like a string of explosions coming right at us. It made it across the field in probably 3 or 4 seconds. The car was engulfed in explosions. I could feel them in my guts like fireworks do. The CD case vibrates off the dash and they're going off like crazy. My friend who's been through some stuff in his life, his mom stabbed his dad up in his sleep while he was in the room next to a 13-year-old, so he's not easy to scare. He's in tears, freaking out, begging me to leave, absolutely pleading. I'm saying, no, I want to know what the fuck is happening. I turned my car back on because I felt bad for this clown in tears and was going to leave. But it all stopped as soon as the car turned on. I remember him saying it sounded like a stampede of horses going around the car. The area had fights from the Revolutionary War and redcoats and bluecoats in that area. It was known for being sympathetic to the redcoats and battles being fought in the area. Can't say that's what it was, if it was a ghost or what, just saying that's what came to mind. I emailed the park 10 or so years later and asked if anyone has ever said anything about anything paranormal to them before. They said no, not one thing ever. To this day I'm left perplexed at what the fuck happened that night. It's mind-blowing. I thought only movies had this kind of stuff, but since then I'm way more open-minded. I still believe a lot of people lie and are just crazy. I hear stories on here where you think, bro, come on, you're full of it, or you need help. But this is what happened to me, believe it or not, and I don't care. But it's the only thing to happen to me. Felt the urge to tell someone. Paranormal event while watching Paranormal Activity. When Paranormal Activity first came out on DVD, I watched it at my friend's apartment. She lived in an independent living portion of an orphanage. I've always loved ghost and haunting movies, and that one really freaked me out. But the freakiest part happened at the end of the movie. I was pretty unnerved by the end of the movie, and after the end scene, the credits started to roll. However, they were not normal credits that you can read. The names were flying by so quickly on the screen that they are just kind of a blur. My friend and I thought that was really strange, so she paused it so we could read the names. When she paused it, the screen showed a ton of tiny names, like 200 of them, and every single name was my first name with a different last name. My blood ran cold and I got chills all over. I could think of no rational explanation for why every single name on the screen was my own. Surely there couldn't have been 200 of my name working on this film. And for all the names to be grouped together instead of separated by their role on the film, it was strange. When we pressed play again, all of a sudden the credits were rolling normally. I've watched the movie since then, and the credits were normal. Happened just that one time. Needless to say, I stayed at her apartment that night, because I did not want to be alone. Felt like some entity was singing, just kind of singling me out. I was pretty freaked out and feeling on edge. Later on, I hear stories about how the orphanage she was staying at was haunted. Met my guardian angel. I was raised Christian, but somewhere along the way I decided I couldn't buy into it without real evidence. It all seemed very suspect, that we were just supposed to believe because of faith. So I considered myself agnostic. I couldn't presume to know either way if God or paranormal things existed, so I didn't really think about it and went on with life. Anyway, that's the mind frame I was at 19 years old when I went to a rave with my boyfriend at the time. I had been drinking, and we had an argument that pissed me off, so I went to sit in the car by myself until he was ready to leave. I was aware of my surroundings and I didn't pass out. I had never drank to the point of blacking out ever. I sat in the passenger seat and remembered the CD I was playing. I hadn't been sitting there long when my passenger door opened and someone crouched down and put their hand on my leg. What struck me is that I didn't feel threatened at all. This person didn't knock first, just opened the door and bent down to touch me like they knew me and knew I wouldn't be afraid. When I looked at this person, I got the impression it was a female, but then I wasn't sure. Maybe it was a feminine male. It was unclear. They looked androgynous with short, dark hair, and even though I was looking directly into their face, I can't remember any of their features. I just get the impression of a light figure dressed in dark clothes with dark hair, but a peaceful presence. I wasn't scared. They said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. Who are you?" "Did my boyfriend send you?" And they said, "No, he didn't. My name's Star. I don't know how to go about explaining who I am." I said, "Okay, well, can you try?" They said, "No, I just came to check on you if you're okay. I must be going now." I asked them to stay, but they shook their head and said that they had to go. At this point, I had to come to think I was speaking to a woman. So she closed the door, and I watched her walk off in the rearview mirror. A little while later, my boyfriend gets in the car. I asked him, did he send that woman to check on me? He asked who I was talking about. I explained the interaction, and he said that he'd been watching the car the entire time as I was sitting in it, and nobody came to the car. In fact, the doors were locked, and he had to unlock them to get in. He was shocked because the experience had seemed so visceral and real. He was raised Catholic and told me that angels were often described as featureless and androgynous the way I had described them. Like looking into a bright light, but it didn't hurt my eyes. I scoffed at first, but then realized I had no better explanation. Ever since that night, I've been convinced I met my guardian angel. I know how crazy that sounds, but it was so real and I don't know how to explain it otherwise. I'm positive I didn't black out. Has anyone had a similar experience? Stars dancing in the sky. A few nights ago, I was out late at night with my family and some friends. It's really smoky out, and I looked up and noticed a relatively bright star in the sky, about like Vega in brightness. I'm into astronomy, so I looked at it for a while, trying to see if I could identify it with my star app on my cell phone. And that's when I noticed a couple of odd things. The star was moving, not in a straight line like a satellite or an airplane. It was staying in its same little patch of sky, but it was moving in a random pattern and at random speeds. Sometimes very slow, sometimes it would stop, sometimes it would shoot very fast. It wasn't wiggling a little bit like atmospheric distortion. It was moving a significant distance. I pointed it out to the people I was with, and we all agreed that we saw it move. Also, it wasn't appearing on my star map. The other people I were with identified 3 additional lights doing the same thing. Also in the sky, there were normal stars that weren't moving and not as bright. After watching for a good long time, I realized that they were also pulsing light seemingly at random. It would flash slightly and illuminate the clouds around it, so it was inside the clouds. Sometimes only a quarter would flash. Sometimes it would light up the clouds around it all the way around. I watched them for about an hour until it was time to leave, and then drove an hour away. They weren't in the sky at my house, only at the location we originally saw them. This is the second time I've seen something like this, but this is the first time that I had a whole crowd with me to acknowledge what I was seeing and watch with me. I think I have a cursed rock. Me and my girlfriend love going to castles and exploring. We live in the UK and had an English heritage pass, so we'd go to a few castles when we could. June or July last year, we go and visit Beeston Castle. It's a fantastic castle on a hill, and there's a whole knights tournament taking place. We sat on a wall at the bottom of the hill and noticed a rock was loose. My girlfriend laughs and says that we should put it in our pocket as a memento. I had cargo shorts on, so laughed about it and put it in the pocket where I forgot about it. Until we got home. We had a lovely day until we leave. She starts to feel unwell, and on the way was sick, so I had to pull over. She has a rough week before going to the doctors and finding out her kidneys are failing. This was an issue that she suffered with in the past, but for over a year had no issues. She made a recovery after about a month. We went on holiday in September, and while away, my granddad had a fall and banged his head. He healed up before I returned, but has bad knees and needs surgery, which keeps getting pushed back. My car broke in October and was taken off the road as the engine broke and couldn't be reasonably replaced. Still without a car, having to borrow my mom's until I could afford a new one. November comes and my girlfriend's mom, who has a number of long-term health conditions, gets sepsis and is in the hospital where she nearly dies, and a DNR is placed on her by the doctor. She does come out after making a recovery, but has had several more stints in the hospital through this year. Each one of them, she has a time where she can't breathe and is close to death. My nan has had cancer for a while and finishes her radiotherapy in December. All seems to go fine, but is told near Christmas that it didn't work out and the cancer is basically now all over the body. She's still fighting and on medication, but it seems nothing will clear the cancer. January, and our cat gets hit by a car and dies. We had him less than 12 months. February, and my girlfriend's grandma is unwell and dies on Valentine's Day. March and April, our dog gets unwell and has to be put down. May and June, her nan is unwell with cancer and dies after a short battle. July, my mom is now unwell and her muscles wearing away after drastically losing weight and not being able to eat much. She's been diagnosed with liver thrombosis, but having loads of tests to see what else. She has a lot of falls, can't make it upstairs all the time, and needs a bit of care, which my dad struggles with as he has spinal problems. Also, my granddad is admitted to the hospital as he has a long-term blood infection. He has no idea how he got it. This is prolonging his surgery again, and this morning my mom's car goes in for a service, an MOT, and it fails with the timing belt needing replacing. They haven't gotten one, so it could be weeks. I need transport for work, so trying to arrange a courtesy car. We also are waiting for money for my girlfriend's grandma's house sale to come through, as we're going to be given some money for a car, but last night we were told this too is delayed. That sounds like a series of more than bad luck, sir.